Te ho ki te uru, whakataka te ho ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia matara tara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihe Māori ora. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Council for 2022. I'd like to start with apologies. I have no apologies for the meeting, although I'm assuming some lateness at this stage. And I just noting that Jake McClellan is beaming in from somewhere. So, and just to, so there were no apologies received, no declarations of interest, and just prior to going on to public participation, because we've got a deputation, is that right? Just prior to moving to that, I'll just note that because we have split the multi-use arena paper into a public-facing document and a PX document, which covers all of the confidential commercial material, and there is one other item on the agenda. I will go into PX at 11:15, and we will deal with the PX elements of that item on the agenda at 11:30. I'm hoping we won't need to be in the public excluded part of the meeting very long, but we will then come back and debate the public paper. Tim?
Yeah, I think everyone knows that I'm a board member of VO, which is an advisor to the CMA board.
Yep.
But as there's no conflict today because of the nature of the discussion.
Yes, no, thank you for that. I've noted that for the record. That's Venues Aotearoa as an advisor to the board of the board that is its name escapes me, but they will be here later on this morning, and that 11:30 time is structured around their availability. So thank you very much for that. So I'll move on to public participation, no public forum presentations, and I'll move on to deputations by appointment, and I will invite Josiah Tuola Malihi, Dominic Wilson and Professor Bronwyn Hayward. We normally only have two, but because we're on Zoom, it's easy to invite the three of you to present. So great to see you from a distance, Josiah, and I'll hand over to you.
Malo lava, whakatiri lava for having us, Mary Ann and councillors. We're grateful that you councillors, Sarah, brought this to the table last year, and that you all supported the recommendation that staff do the report. Thank you to council staff for a great report, and we're hopeful for the recommendation and your deliberations today. But just simply, as has been said, Dominic is here and Professor Bronwyn's here. Bronwyn wants to give a wee comment in a moment in her work with children and young people and lifelong access, not just access for children and youth through her Cycles project, but just in addition to what we've written, as you know, at least 12 councils have made this change. Selwyn Council has said there's been an increase in borrowing since they implemented this. Waimakariri has received books back that have been long at the bottom of the cupboard. The maximum cost at the moment per item of $21 that an adult can be fined is too much, especially in the context where we know the needs of our families in this COVID context is even more, and it cost council $42,000 to try and bring that money back in. I had a personal experience with a student when I couldn't afford to, when I made a mistake and didn't return a book, and I ended up having to bring the books back, and I had a $100 fine. And even though I was able to scrape together the money, it would have been extremely helpful not to have had to pay that. In the end, I didn't, but that was not the norm, and I'm glad to see that the norm would be that that wouldn't happen for people who are trying to do the right thing and return them, and for life circumstances have gotten in the way. Also, just if we can acknowledge the University of Canterbury Student Association, which also think this is the right thing to do, and their previous president Kim and their current president Pierce, and the 18,000 students they support, which say this would help. Cool. That's all I was hoping to say. And Dom, over to you.
Just unmute myself. I just had a couple of notes specifically looking at around the idea of equity. I think from my perspective, there's a large theme of equity within the comments that have been shared within these reports and whatnot. Excuse me. And I think from my perspective, just finishing high school, we have a large problem of literacy within schools and education, and wherever possible, I think that comes from a whole family perspective, encouraging families to be able to educate and put reading into the minds of their kids, making it exciting and whatnot. And for so many families, that becomes the equity issue that whether it's because of socioeconomic status or whatever, their family isn't able to do that, and kids are missing out, young people are missing out. And so I think that's a really important part about recognising with this issue. And in my notes here, I wrote a wee bit talking about the idea that libraries act as a safe haven to really be able to, just hide away and read a good book, or to be able to take one out and have that feeling anywhere. And I mean, I believe we should be doing everything possible to ensure that everybody should be able to do that, whether socioeconomic status, reading levels within education or whatnot. Yeah, so that's me.
Thank you, Tom. Over to you, Professor Bromwell.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Josiah has just asked me to speak for half a minute about a study that he's been involved with too, that we're running, where we're writing it up, called Cycles, following children and young people aged 12 to 24 growing up in 7 cities around the world, including 390 young people from Otatahi, Christchurch, who we've surveyed. And the point of the study is to think about how city councils can support children to live well in low carbon sustainable ways. And one of the basic questions we asked kids in Christchurch was, what do they enjoy about living around here? And what was really surprising was, on top of their green space and their friends, and specific things were named, Margaret Mahi Playground, council be really pleased, but the libraries came through, and in our focus groups, we made a particular effort to make sure that the focus groups came from a really diverse areas of the city. So we're not just dealing with DSL 10 high users. And there were several things that children appreciated in young people: the safe spaces, the access to adults who cared for them, and just a place to hang out. There are very few places for the middle teen to actually interact with others. And this fits with loads of studies that are showing that when you invest in libraries, and I love the fact that the city has a library at its heart, Turanga, and so many kids said how much they love that library, you reduce youth crime, you increase youth wellbeing. There's so many good things that happen. And I just want to thank the council so much for the first decision to keep libraries open longer. It has a huge wellbeing dividend and mental health effect, which we haven't really understood properly, and I'm so grateful to the council for doing that. And I think this is really far-sighted as well. I know lots of places are doing it, but we're all under pressure, and it just removes a barrier that makes an enormous difference. Thank you.
And that was all we were hoping to say. Thank
All right.
you, Mary-Ann.
Well, thank you, because you've allowed sufficient time for questions. So I'll hand over to councillors. Jimmy Chen.
Okay, thank you. Josiah and Dominica, just one question, because you did have the community poll, the sign by 275 people in support. There's a geographic diversify or not? Can you explain
Yes.
a little bit? Yes.
So across Christchurch, across ages, across the different wards of the city. And then obviously the 18,000 students from the University of Canterbury who are being spoken for through the UCSA cover all of Christchurch and broader Canterbury.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron Kewen.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation, and it's certainly food for thought. Now, you've mentioned the importance of the access to the libraries. The people who have the fines can still access libraries and use them, but none of you have mentioned the people that are currently not allowed to access the libraries and the importance of them having access to books, especially children who may not have made a decision that has caused that. Do any of you have a position on that?
Yeah, that's very, very important. I don't think that a child's access should be impeded because a family member, if I'm understanding what you're saying, has got fines and not able to access a book or
No,
able
not
to only
fines,
access
is
a couple of.
chosen for whatever reason to not have a vaccine pass, or so they can't access a library.
But they can all borrow books still. So alternative arrangements will be made for those ones. I think this is focused on the fine situation rather than vaccine policy,
Right.
which we have provided for in other ways, for exactly the reasons that you highlight. Access is so important.
Right. Oh, okay. Because in the report, I was sure that I read that even with fines, children can still get 2 books.
Yes, I know, but if you read the report, then you'd understand that. I mean, but this is the debate, but
Yeah.
You'll understand that parents don't often realise that,
Okay.
and they borrow on
Yeah.
the parents' library card. Yep, sorry.
I know this, can I just add, I know this isn't exactly what you're asking, Aaron, but we do know from a lot of research that when people are anxious that there might be a fine, that's another barrier to coming in the door. I must admit, when I renewed my library card at Christmas, I went in and couldn't remember if I had any fines, and I was really anxious. And I'm not sitting there in a situation where my family income is affected. But the whole issue about access for education is a much wider question, and that's a difficult challenge for everybody.
Did someone else have a question? No? It's good. Okay, well, look, thank you all very much for making the presentation this morning. It's much appreciated.
Thank you for having us. Talk by everyone.
Kia ora, thank you. So I think that then brings us on. Oh, no, not quite. We've got presentation of petitions. There are none. Supplementary reports. So I'd like to move that we include the supplementary reports in the meeting, and that's the NEMA Regulatory Framework Review Trifecta Program. Oops, misspelt. And the open report on the Semua project delivery limited preliminary design. Second that. Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And now I'll move and block the minutes of the meetings. Do I have a seconder for that, Andrew? I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And that now brings us to the staff report on the removal of library fines. Carolyn, are you coming to the table? Carolyn Robertson, Head of Libraries and Information. Oh, sorry, Elaine's side. Sorry, I wasn't. It's very difficult. I'll put my mask back on. You can take your mask off when you speak. So, thank you. I think so. Is that right?
Yeah, she wishes
Can
to.
the presenter take their mask off when they're speaking? Yes. No. Oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies.
Okay.
I think it's we're going to get some updated information. The new rules come in on the 3rd of February, so I'm going to get some further advice about the meeting. But at the moment, the recommendation is that councillors wear masks during the meeting, except when they're speaking, but it is not a requirement. You're not required to. So, thank you. Sorry, Carolyn.
That's fine. Kia ora koutou katoa. So really Elaine and I are here to answer questions that councillors have. I've got a very brief, very short overview, really just a recap of the report if you want it. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
And then very happy to, obviously, to take questions that you have. So, as you're aware, the report was written as a result of a notice of motion passed by the Finance and Performance Committee on the 25th of the 11th, 21, that staff bring a report to Council enabling a decision to be made on the removal of fines for overdue library items and all historic debt relating to overdue charges by the end of January 22. Section 3 really outlines the key information about fines, which I think everyone is pretty familiar with now, in terms of how it works, essentially the processes, and also a summary of the benefits of removing fines and the types of feedback received by customers on this issue. So I think a number of people have got feedback, clearly, and we've heard from the deputation. We've taken a sample from the complaints and feedback that people have made directly to the library, and also touched on the trend, as has been made very clear, for public libraries to remove library fines, adult fines, both in New Zealand and overseas, that this is a very well-established trend and growing. So Council at the meeting in November, you requested us to consider alternatives for the removals of fines. So what else have we considered, or what else do we have in place? That's section 4. And that includes such things as concession membership, managed accounts, payment plans, renewals of library items for everyone, and regular reminders, how the reminder system works so that people don't get into the situation where they have overdue items and get into financial difficulty. The 5th section provides more detail on the barriers and challenges that customers face via the feedback, so that's detailed with direct anecdotal comment, and also what the experience has been for those libraries that have gone fines free. And certainly the major themes are really around increased usage, growth in membership, new and returning, and positive perception of those library services and those councils. And we touch on also the cons. I think we were asked quite directly what are sort of the cons relating to that in terms of, and really there's clearly the financial implications, but the other aspect is, does this actually mean that people don't return the material? There's a real drop-off in that. And from our research, our understanding is no, that really has made very, very little difference. Section 7 covers off so that's the financial implications of removing fines. And that's detailed really as what that would mean if Council makes the decision to do this in terms of revenue, estimated revenue loss in the current financial year, plus the value of the debt write-off, noting that those numbers are always a little bit changeable, and also, which is in total 183,000 is our best estimate, and also the ongoing annual estimated loss in revenue of approximately 300,000 per annum. And then also the related OPEX costs would be reduced in terms of the cost that it takes staff to actually try and recover the fines of around $40,000. And obviously our report also includes our recommendation that Council agrees to the removal of charges for overdue items and all historic debt related to overdue charges and we're proposing the 1st of March 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Tim.
Thank you. With my dyslexia, I'm a very slow reader, and I've always gone to the library and longingly looked at the new releases. And it's always worded, it must be back within 3 weeks. So I've looked at them, but I've never got one out because it'd just be an automatic fine for me. But now that I'm going to actually take some out because once this has come through, what about the wording with regards within the library to soften that? Because you want the books back within a certain period of time, obviously, because there's a high turnover of popular and new books. But now that there's no kind of fine, so is there a softening of the words, so encouraging people to take books out that are in my position? It was just something to look at anyway, just something to think of.
Short answer, Councillor Scandrett, is yes. We will need to look at actually all our communications around this just to make sure that we're both encouraging. Really what we're wanting to do is encourage people to come back who might have stopped using us. And for people who the library's a barrier, they're not using us at all. They haven't joined because they're worried about this issue. Or they know people who are. as well as existing users like yourself, just to say, actually, this is how the situation is working now. We want to encourage use, but also we're wanting to remind, and we'll keep reminding people, or sending out the reminders when you take your items out, that you've still, hey, don't forget about the fact that it needs to come back at some point. That won't be the wording. Elaine will be horrified. But so we will need to look at all our messaging around that to make sure it's consistent with, if this goes through, with the changes that we're making.
I'll get them back as soon as possible, I promise.
Okay.
Jimmy Chen.
Thank you. Two questions. The first one on page 120, paragraph 5.6. You mentioned 14% of the members, customers, are unable to borrow any further items. But do you have any further additional information, particularly by the age, diversify who they are? They are young people, elderly person, or not?
It's across the board.
Across the board?
Yeah.
Okay, but all adults?
Adults,
yes, this is the adult membership.
Okay.
So,
yes.
Second question, according to the paragraph 9, risk multiplication. 9.1, the financial impact on risk, the financial year from now on till the June. I just want to know all those $183,000, whether the library will absorb all this gap or not. 183 from now on till the end of June.
Made up of what we're estimating as a loss of revenue, because we'll be no longer charging fines, and which is approximately $100 and the 100,000. I'm sorry, and the 83,000, which is what we're estimating is the value of the write-off of the historic debt.
But the library can mitigate this effect by yourself.
No.
So for funding 183.
No, we're not proposing that.
Not okay. Last question, just follow this one. From now on to the financial year 23, you mentioned you remove those 300,000 and onward per year. But whether this part of the draft annual plan will have a further discussion or not?
So I
onward from the July 1st, 22 to the end of June 23. Annual plan on.
Yes, so what we've said in there is the revenue, and I'm not sure if our finance manager wants to comment, but has been removed from the draft annual plan working. So in other words, we are not. That is if this goes through, it's not proposing that the library needs to find that in another way, that it's included in the annual plan budget.
Okay, thank you.
You come forward, but you'll have to replace one of the. Sorry.
Yes, just to answer that question, this is low. We have in the draft annual plan, so that we have actually added back that 300, so it has been adjusted for already. Obviously, nothing's been decided until it's adopted, but that has been put in. But on the assumption I was just going through.
Okay, thank you.
I've got James and then Jake.
Thanks. Just following on, I guess, from what Tim was saying, at what point is a late return then a non-return? And are costs recovered, I'm assuming they are, for stolen or non-returned books? And can you just explain to me how that works exactly?
Yeah,
Yes, certainly.
So if you take something out, it's due at such and such a time, 28 days after that time, we class that as a lost book.
Yes.
So at that time, customers have already had regular notices, and so then after that they get an invoice for the cost of that item plus a processing fee, and so
on
then,
top of the late fee, or does that compound?
no,
Or is
then
it just...
when it's returned, the late fee, the cost of the item is removed, and the $21 will be as a fine would be introduced.
I'm sorry, I'm getting into the rats and mice, but it's just a part of it that I just don't quite understand. So, and if it's never returned, say it is or stolen, then they'll try and recover it for the cost of the item.
Yeah, so it'll go off to debt collection, and then if they can't find it, then it's written off.
And you kind of answered it, but it was really around: do you expect books to never be returned, or would that increase of loss? Would you expect the number of lost books to at all increase if
Not
adult
really.
fines were removed?
We already have this situation with children's books, so and we
Well aware of that.
so we don't notice. I mean, our buying patterns or replacements are geared towards meeting customer demand, so we can make changes to that, but we don't anticipate there'd be a huge increase in the number of lost books.
And do you find, this is my final question on it, this could just be our household, because I notice that there are Peppa Pig books and wonderful library books that are just constantly at our house from courtesy of Christchurch City Council Library. They're there for a very long time, and I'm glad that there aren't fines associated with them, but the kids love them and they go through periods of wanting to have the same book for a number of nights or weeks sometimes. Given there's no late fines for children and there are fines for adults, do you notice a variance in your own data between the return timings of those two, or is it just our household where that would be quite a marketable one?
No, I think it's across the board. You'll end up getting into the situation where you just keep things at home as for children's books until, I come in to get some more and I can't, so then I have to actually find those ones.
I guess what I'm saying is that a number of days out that a book is that membership or the data identical for child members as it is adult members? Or near enough the same?
It would be about the same.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've done detailed analysis on that, but our sense would be that it's very similar.
Borrowing time for the two membership categories, I was really
that's
asking.
just the same.
Jay?
Cool.
Two questions. Thanks, Carolyn. So in terms of this $300,000 cost, I'm aware some councillors are keen to support this on the basis that savings could be found elsewhere. And kind of following on from Jimmy's question, but just to kind of restate it, you're not proposing you're proposing that $300,000 is essentially new money that council would have to find, but libraries themselves aren't proposing to make a quantum of cut and around that figure.
We are no, that's correct. So we're proposing that this is a reduction in our revenue target, really, to that extent. So we did a comprehensive operational savings exercise through the LTP, and so and one of the reasons actually that we didn't put this forward through the LTP was because there was a very, very strong need for operational savings to be made. So we've made a lot of savings in a lot of areas, or reductions where we can. So we feel we've kind of reached the end of the road in that line in terms of these, something of this quantum. We're always looking for efficiencies and savings, of course, but this is a reasonably significant figure.
Right. So it is new money, essentially.
Yes.
A second question is, if council were to kind of earmark an increase in the library's budget, this would be the best way you'd want to spend that money. Like if we were just to write a check for $300,000, it would be library fine write-offs, or you'd rather do something like adding to your collections or something else.
What a great question. I can feel Councillor Templeton's eyes boring into me. Yeah, but no, absolutely. No, I mean, we were really delighted when this came forward from Councillor Templeton. It is something we've been very aware for a number of years that this is what a significant barrier. It's as our the people who spoke to you in the deputation and all the feedback that councillors have received to actually really everything that we can do to maximise use and access and equity of access. And take the negative kind of aspects away that actually our staff deal with too. So we know it's very hard for members of the community, for lots of people, and our staff are at the front line of that. And the more we can do to encourage use and circulation and membership, clearly that's what we're here to do. So short answer is we think it's a very, very good use of that money if this decision is made.
I've got
perfect. And sorry, final question is just in terms of the notice in motion, obviously your proposal to abolish these fines is due for consideration as part of our annual plan process. How did the notice in motion come about? What kind of involvement did you have in getting that in place to abolish these fines a little earlier?
it's probably better to ask the question, did staff have any involvement in shaping the notice of motion? No.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so Sarah can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it was my notice of motion. How it came about was I saw a tweet from Pipacoom in Auckland and letting people know that they had done it in Auckland. And so I contacted Auckland Library staff who gave me their information. I checked in with our staff to see whether they would be supportive and what work had been done in the past. And then I brought the notice of motion, but I wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And okay, I've got Yanni, Sarah, and Sam.
Just to be really clear, were the staff going to come as part of this draft annual plan anyway and recommend that we remove the library fines?
No.
Not until we were approached.
And just like I'm really supportive of this, but I am concerned about why the notice of motion was accepted when we've got an annual plan budget process.
So the staff do not answer those questions. We're dealing with the library issues. If you want to address that question, address it to the chief executive. We were the ones who accepted the notice of motion, which asked for a report which staff have delivered to this meeting. So if you could frame your question appropriately and politely to the library staff.
Thanks. So I'm just trying to understand from a financial point of view. Like I said, I support this. I'm just trying to understand why it doesn't need to go through the draft annual plan consultation process.
So that's probably a question more for
Dawn.
it's a legal issue in relation to the consultation process. So if we could have a legal response to that, but that if we could just deal with the issues in relation to the substantive issue, we'll ask we'll get the answers to the technical issues before we enter into the debate.
I have just several other questions. One was, do we have a sense of the library fines at the moment and where restricted access is across the different libraries? Like, is there a kind of pattern that you can see around which communities are impacted by this currently?
It goes across all libraries, but there is particularly for people with low socio-economic areas, it is a barrier more so for them, but you can go into any library and there's an issue there around paying fines.
And I'll just add to Elaine's comment that our feedback shows people who are often contacting us about it and with complaints or concerns. The financial aspect is a very key feature. So we haven't actually literally mapped that to where they're living, but that is a very strong theme that comes through.
Okay. Because I guess in the report, and you've touched on that, in some councils, they've noticed that with the fines being removed, that there's not the return of books. So I just was interested in the debt collection costs, because that's actually quite considerable for people. The debt collection agencies charge a fortune, and I just wondered whether there's also any work happening around how to reduce those barriers to people. And just related to that, also, does the system have an ability, if we remove the fines, to track individuals around the number of times that books have come back late, so that if you had, a small group of people that were just blatantly abusing the system, that you could monitor and take action in that regard?
Yeah. So we would still follow the current process that we have for lost books, that they have a certain period of time to bring something back, then we would invoice them, and if they don't pay, then they go off to debt collection, and so that debt collection fee is then put in with the amount of money that they actually owe. So several years ago, the library used to absorb that collection fee, but it was seen to be unfair across the board for all customers, or for council to actually have to pay that. So we added that, and that went through the fees and charges process, so that anybody that is referred to debt collection, they get to pay that debt referral fee as well.
Sorry, I get the current process.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned about is, for all the reasons that we're removing library fines, we've still got the same issues around debt collection, and probably even, we've heard a figure of $100. I imagine some of the debt collection figures are way more than that. So what I was interested in is if there's been any thinking around how to reduce that cost and that barrier to people, in terms of like, you know, the kind of high level principle that we're looking at in terms of removing library fines.
So it's continuing to let customers know when something's late to encourage them to bring it back before they get into that situation where it is way overdue and they can't use the library anymore and they're referred to debt collection.
We've talked at this stage, you know, knowing that the decision is yet to be made, but talked about how we can actually promote that more. So where there's both our own reporting and there's a third party piece of software called Library Elf that does a very easy way of reminding people that we do a really a strong promotion around all those ways that we can actually stop you getting to the point essentially where you're going to have a lost book and incur
So
those
maybe can I
charges.
just flag as part of the draft annual plan that when you come back around the fees and charges, and you know obviously we're going to have to make changes with if this goes through, that we do get some sense of that as well. Like, do you need funding for the software to do it? Or?
No, we don't.
Are you asking the library staff about a generic debt collection process which actually properly sits with our finance people?
No, I don't think it does. I think it sits with library
Are you
staff.
still pursuing a line where you are outside the brief for the staff that we have here?
No, because the concern in the report, which staff identify, is that if you remove the fines, there is a risk that people don't return books. So what they've seen in some other places where this has happened is that there's a potential risk that people don't return books. If you take the principle that the notice of motion, and I believe the staff report's trying to address, which is creating greater access and equity to our libraries, one of the other barriers will be the high cost of debt collection, and that will stop people from accessing the libraries, possibly a lot greater than the fines. But I was just interested.
So the high costs of debt collection are included in the trade-off, which is the 100,000, whatever it is. So I don't really want to enter into debate. I think you've had your question asked and answered. Did you have another question related to the issue around library fines?
So just the reference that staff made to the software, is that currently budgeted for, or do you need budget to do that?
No, it's in place now. Yes. It just needs higher promotion. So it's a choice thing for customers to be able to use. So it's a free access.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We've got Sarah and then Sam.
Thanks so much. Hey, listen, you mentioned earlier that Selwyn's seen some books that were assumed lost and charged appropriately being returned. Is that because once a fine kind of gets too big and it gets too late, actually it's the fine itself that stops people returning books because they, I don't know, because they then have to pay it and they feel ashamed and stuff?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so fines are in some cases a deterrent to returning books.
That's right, yes. And again, we can, to add, and again, that's about the campaign. You know, we can have a campaign. We can really actively promote, come back, sort out these kind of issues really as well. I think we can acknowledge that in the communications that we put out, and just the way that we ensure that staff are very aware and can have those conversations with people.
Thank you, Sam, and then Phil.
Thank you both for coming in for it. Just two quick things. One of them was on, I guess, to follow up to James's point, and I probably missed it, but in 5.8, I think it is. Oh yeah, so it's just got in there, if an item is not returned after a specific period of time, it's deemed lost, which is all good. Just for my information, what is that time period? And apologies if I have missed it.
It's 28 days after the item was due.
28 days after, okay.
That's when they get an invoice, so that's the start of the process, really.
Right. Yeah, so I guess like if I went into the library, and assuming this went through, I went in today, took a book out, at what point under the new, whenever it kicks in, under the new system, would that book be deemed as lost?
It still will be the current process now, which is 28 days after it's due, then it's then puts a block on. But you'll get a notice 3 days before it's due to remind you to bring it back.
Right.
And then you get another one about 7 days after it's due. So there's several reminders that we will send you.
Yeah, okay. And just the only other one, and I appreciate, because I know when we had the notice of motion come through, I talked about the need for the alternate options, and I'm grateful that you've done that. Can you just in really layman's terms explain to me and it's probably my really too simplistic view on a lot of stuff, just around what I thought would have been a good model was just like a compassionate consideration type thing. So where things become an issue, because by and large, keep a bit of tension in the system with the fines. But if something got bad or there was staff that said, look, we don't think this is working, that they could, end up on one of your desks. Which alternate option would that be?
Well, really, I mean, the concession membership that we have currently, I mean, that actually covers, depending on what the issues are, but if people feel that they have access issues, I mean, we've said in here physical or mental disability, but I mean, that can be a pretty broad spectrum as well. But if it's hard for people, then we can set them up with a concession membership if they meet the criteria. So it's only a small number of total members that actually are in that category. Yeah. But again, that is something that all staff are very aware on the front line, that is an option when they're joining people up. Right. And the other one is the managed. We also have, and this is a very small number, but the managed accounts. So that might, and with agreement with the customer, that they would be limited to a smaller number of items, which would be their choice to do that, as well as the payment plans and other things that I've detailed there.
So is there any ability, I guess, for if something happens, say someone has $5 out and something horribly goes really wrong in their life,
yes,
for at the moment for them to come in and see one of you and have those wiped?
There is, so yes, we can waive. So we give our senior staff the right. ability to waive under exceptional circumstances. So absolutely, that is an option there.
Perfect. No, that's great. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. I've got Phil next.
Hi, thanks very much. It's always good to see you guys. But will this make it more enjoyable for your staff to go to work? Because I'm sure that you get people who, I'd never be a librarian to be fair, but they go along because they want to meet people and they enjoy books. They've got better things to do with their life than fill out bits of paper and chase money. So it's going to make it.
Yes, I was sort of trying to touch on. Thank you for asking that. I was trying to touch on that before. I mean, our primary focus is on our citizens and customers, but yes, our staff do not enjoy having those. There's often quite distressing conversations because people are often upset whether they're ringing up or coming in, and for often for very good reasons. But that's not easy for staff to be dealing with.
And that's not what they put their hand up to do the job for.
No,
so, that's good.
Right.
Thank you.
Positive, good service is what they're focused on delivering. Yes.
Yeah, that was Aaron.
Sorry, it's just a quick question because I note in it's quite a big change to change the system like this, as in the way people have lent books for a long time. And Sam's questions alluded to fines being able to be wiped under circumstances, which is good. Video libraries always did that, and so on, and other businesses, so libraries should as well. There'll be a lot of claims made in a couple of minutes' time when we go to debates on outcomes and scenarios and what does and doesn't happen from both sides and the costs and the benefits and everything else. And it's a big cost, $300,000. Was there consideration given to putting a time trial on this, like either a year? And I note with the library, the Trafford Library, there was the increase after the year, but also after 2 years. So reviewing, rather than just going, no, we just change everything and then just leave it, which is often what we do at council, but we don't review the impacts because it could be exceptionally good, could have not much impact and cost us a lot of money. So was that not in the report as an option that it should be done, reviewed after a year or 2 years to see whether the intention has been met?
I think I'll just say that so that wasn't in the scope of the notice of motion, but I would say that the library will be very keen to monitor how this is actually going, whether it is meeting the needs that council intend or not, and whether it's a trial or not. I think I'm leaving that to you to discuss. But in terms of evaluation and impact, we'll be doing that. We're more than happy to come back to council. In fact, we would expect to come back to council and let you know if this is decided how it's going. What are I think, Leanne, you might have asked what are the in terms of the pros and cons, and that information is still coming from our other libraries in New Zealand. We've been asking those questions, but it's reasonably early days for a lot of libraries. We'll be exactly in the same boat, very keen to understand what the impact of this is.
Yeah, I've got Anne and then Sam.
Sorry.
Sorry, Aaron.
Just it's a question for you, Leanne, because we often don't review stuff we do. We might get updates, but it's a done deal. Like you remove the fines, they're just gone forever. Why why would we not put a timeline on this to see whether it's worked, and then it either stays or it goes after
I don't
1 or
make
2
that
years?
decision. I'm in the meeting's hands. So if you wish to move an amendment that it is formally reviewed after a period of time, then that's perfectly in order. But I will let Sarah respond because it's her notice of motion that led to this.
Yeah, I was asking a question actually. So there's a difference between reviewing something after a period of time, 6 months and a year, and the libraries do regular reporting to the committee, and so I'd expect that to come through there. But if this was advertised and framed as a trial, do you think it would have the full impact anyway? So if people thought that they get a book out and then they might not realise that we've put fines back on again if it hasn't worked, those kind of things, it might actually put people off coming back in.
I think the other side of it is a lot of difficult conversations when after removing fines and then putting them back on, there's an assumption that removing them is there forever.
If we didn't let people know.
And then you have to actually have, okay, it was all right last year, you could do that, but now you have to pay again. That's really
We'd really have to work the communications to ensure that we, didn't have a problem from that point of view.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. No, it's a decision.
So, Anne, you had a question.
Thanks, Carolyn. Just clarifying what age, children up to what age can have to have an adult with them in the library? They can't just come into a library, can they? Children, they have to be over 12?
Yeah, so that's what we've got at the moment.
Yes, over 12. Yes. Yeah, so no child can come into a library on their own until they're over 12. Right, I think.
Correct.
No.
So, sorry, it's not possible to have a conversation around the table. So
my understanding is the Rangatamariki says that they should have supervision. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Sorry, I've found that difficult to hear. So you're saying that in order to enter a library, if you're under 12, you have to be accompanied by an adult?
Yes.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, just one more, and it was sort of follow on to what you were saying before about the, senior staff having the ability to waive fines as it stands. So if we look at like 5.5 and we've got the customer feedback from people, are they situations now, like I'm just trying to understand the level of when things would be waived. So if someone comes in saying, like it's got in here, I had a customer crying on the phone, she couldn't pay the fine, she was a solo mother. I'm just wondering at what point would that be waived? Like surely something like that would be waived under the current settings now. Is that?
It's usually sort of a negotiation. You can't. There's always some customers that will try that every time, and you don't really know whether it's true or not.
Right. Yep.
But it's also we do waive, and we might negotiate that. How about you pay half, or
cool.
that kind of scenario.
Yeah, so it's quite a personal thing, and you work with them.
It's hard. Sorry, and it's hard. I think it's quite hard to pull these quotes out because I think reading that you would think why on earth wasn't that?
Well, that's why I was wondering why because they're quite emotive.
Yeah,
and I just thought I didn't want to leave the public with the impression that we couldn't waive some of these, given there is already a system in place. So I am right in thinking we can. You've got that discretion. We can waive that now.
Yes, we have. We make sure we just look into it very thoroughly, and we're even-handed in our treatment of it too. So
no, that's fantastic. Cool. Thank you. That's great.
So just as a follow-up from that, so walk us through a situation where somebody in one of these circumstances comes into the library not realising that they've had their library privileges withdrawn and go to take out a book. They're then told that, no, you've got this outstanding fine. What then happens? Do you take them away to a private part of the library in order to have a conversation, or are they referred to somebody to have that private conversation, or what's the process? Well, so generally speaking, we certainly encourage staff to be having those conversations as confidentially, in a sense of privacy as they can do, and to encourage our staff on the front, in our frontline service to be able to have those conversations and, if possible, resolve the situation at that point of time. So again, it's about good customer service and everything we can do to ensure that the customer is informed, understands the situation, has some constructive ways to actually deal with it.
If it can't be resolved at that point, then we would want to arrange with that person to have a phone conversation or a meeting to talk through further, which would be with somebody who was possibly more experienced. We've got experienced frontline staff, but with a more senior staff member, particularly if it's a fairly complex situation, or there's more information comes out later, because all sorts of things can actually happen here. And for us to understand too, have we let the side down somewhere? Is there something that we haven't done in terms of our communication with that customer, so that we're really looking at it as widely and comprehensively as possible?
So when you identify the cost of the enforcement system, you've actually left out a significant chunk of time and effort by senior staff.
That is correct. Yes, that's right. We haven't touched on if you costed all that time that happens at those interactions when people come in and, as you say, find out that their membership is blocked, or they've got money owing. There is a large period, large amount of time there. That's not factored into this.
And I'll come back to, I've got Sarah and then Sam, but I just wanted to confirm, I looked at some international research online, and they found that eliminating fines gave more time to library staff to help the public, reduces bad interactions with the public, and reduces inequities for lower income patrons. But focusing on those first two, is that your understanding of what the experience would be here, that library staff would be freed up from these difficult conversations and more able to focus on getting good results?
Absolutely, the positive services, yes, the positive engagements with customers and the promotion of our services to people, yes.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah and then Sam.
Thanks so much. Listen, we know that you do wipe fines under some circumstances, that it is a little time consuming, but that does happen, which is great. But we also know from experiences that you've shared with us and that the community has shared and emailed and those kind of things, that actually there's still a lot of people in very difficult circumstances. A partner's gone to hospital, a range of different things where fines haven't been wiped. Do you think that, how easy is it to draw the line in those circumstances? And is it down to people's capacity to approach staff in those circumstances? And do you think that if we made that more widely known, people maybe would take up more staff time by more people coming forward with more stories that maybe not actually correct? Do you see what I mean? It's like if people knew that was just kind of what you did, if someone had a circumstances, then
it's the squeaky wheel.
As I think you touched on, Councillor Templeton, sometimes people just who are in dire circumstances don't let us know that at all. They just drop out of the system, really, from our point of view. So yes, some people will make it very, very clear to us, even when it's not necessarily a major issue, and others will just kind of quietly go away and kind of worry about it, and their relationship with their library for them and their family, it just ends at that point.
Yeah, thanks.
Sam.
We'll go all day.
Yeah, okay. Sarah, I'm assuming you'd like to move the motion? Yep.
I've still got a couple of questions.
Oh, sorry, I can't see you from here.
I know, it's hard over Zoom.
I'm going to have to ask someone else to keep an eye on that. Jake.
Two final questions. In terms of, we're obviously considering this notice of motion today. We've got an annual plan decision that's upcoming. Have you given any thought to, I guess, the potential that we may make a decision here that may differ from the annual plan? And, we could, for example, remove library fines today and then, reinstate them in the annual plan. Have you kind of thought about that from a comms perspective?
Well, we'll get the Chief Executive to respond to that question.
So, at the end of the discussion, Mayor, you asked us to say what is the legal position.
Yeah.
So if you're happy for me to deal with that at the end, in case there are any other questions in relation to Councillor Hanston and Councillor McCallum.
So are there any other substantive issues that you want to raise, Jake, or should we get the Chief Executive?
I want to circle back to the notice in motion, because it was sort of jumped in and answered by a politician. But from a staff perspective, we've got this annual plan decision. the notice in motion, what kind of involvement did staff have in forming that notice in motion?
We just heard from staff. That question has been asked and answered, and I'm not going to put up with any nonsense. Staff said they had nothing to do with the notice of motion. So can we...
When did they say that?
Carolyn answered the question. So, I mean, you're not in the room. Everyone in the room heard her answer that question.
And Councillor Sarah Templeton then said exactly what happened and when in what order.
I mean, legal clearly checked the wording like they do with every notice of motion, but that's it. They were my words.
Can we just move on from this? And I'm now going to ask for Dawn and or Helen to respond to the legal issues, the technical issues, and the annual plan issues in relation to Councillor Johansson and Councillor McClellan.
Just first in relation to the consultation question, the scale of the budget we're talking about is not significant or material in relation to the library's activity that's already been approved by you in the long-term plan. So this is a matter that is able to be dealt with within the annual plan process without requiring, from a legal perspective, a separate consultation.
Thank you.
Was there another question, Mayor, that I could help with?
Does that cover your question, Jake?
Oh, it doesn't pertain to it at all, but it's an interesting answer. Yeah, it's completely separate from it.
So restate your question.
Well, my question was to the library staff, which is, have they thought about the consequences
This is not
of...
for the library staff. I've already ruled on that, Jake. Could you please focus your question? Just state your question. I will determine who will answer it. Please state your question.
Okay. The question is, has the organisation thought about the consequences of us removing library fines now and then reinstating them at the annual plan?
Jake, can I answer that? If that happened, we should all resign from our seats. It's in about 6 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So,
which begs the question:
the
why we're not bringing it in?
Sorry, the section that Jake is referring to is the fines section, which is kind of independent of the annual plan to the extent that it's a separate motion. So it's not the motion. You know, it's part of the whole.
I mean,
whole
to be
process.
It's a pretty loaded question, though. I mean, ultimately, if we're not going to be consistent here, the same people are going to be here in 6 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Yeah.
Could make an inconsistent decision at any meeting.
We are, yeah. I mean, the reality is that what happens today is likely to be the same. So it's probably not relevant.
Ultimately, this is an in-year budget matter. We can deal with it in year. The notice of motion came in asking for a report. You all supported that, if my memory serves me correctly. That report has come forward. We have stated how we could deal with this if you want to. If you choose not to, that is fine. And in reality, in anticipating, not determining where you might be, we have been able to look at that from an annual plan perspective to ensure it is included in the figures if it needs to be. I think we're dancing on the head of a pin.
Yeah, I agree.
And I ask members actually to just step back and deal with the matter in front of you.
I've got Yanni and then James.
So it just so as part of the LTP, some of us had amendments for $20,000 or $30,000 that were ruled out of order.
Yanni, could you stop?
I'm just trying to understand the process. Obviously, when we go up for consultation in the draft annual plan, this will be listed as a change.
Yes.
People will have the right to make submissions. So although we won't have a specific SCP, we will actually have an engagement over the draft annual plan around changes to levels of service, etc. Right? So what I'm just trying to understand though, the timing of this, because like if we as councillors want to do notice of motions on other things financially, are we able to do that ahead of the draft annual plan? And what's the process? We just get a staff report.
No, I'll withdraw it and let's just move on.
Helen, would you like to please? Helen and Leah, would you please like to comment? I think I've dealt with the matter. I'm not sure what else I can actually say.
Because normally, if some of us put notice of motions in, we're told
We're tying different things together and previous matters.
I think all I can add to that, Chief Executive, is that, yes, of course, standing orders allow for you to lodge notices of motion, and they'll be dealt with in accordance with the standing orders and the resolutions that this meeting would ultimately make.
Sorry, microphone.
Still on questions?
I thought that. No. I thought the questions have finished. No, Jake, did you have another question?
No.
Well, where's the question from?
We haven't got a motion on the table yet.
Yes, we have. We had it moved by Sarah, seconded by Mike. That the
Did you get that one?
So, but can I just leave this, come back to adjourn this item and come back to it in a short while? All right, thank you. So I'll move on to the draft submission on Section 76 Brougham Street upgrade, and I will look to Mike to move that motion. Do I have a seconder for it? Celeste. Has anyone got any questions or comments for staff? Tim, I think you had an issue that you wanted to raise.
Yeah, I've raised them before, so they won't be a surprise. I guess just a couple of things is, and how do we cope with regards to it seems that through our relationship with Waka Kotahi, they have come to our community board a lot with regards to what they're doing on Brougham Street. They've done combined with us, the study between Brougham and Morehouse. There's nothing done really on the south side of Brougham Street, which was obviously a concern for us as our community board does both sides of Brougham Street. But how do we go forward with regards, what's the process of the concerns we have that the effects will be on the community? Because one of the things that was never discussed with us was the no right turn onto Selwyn Street, and it was a safety issue. The safety issue there with the community is getting across Brougham Street, not so much the Selwyn Street shops, which we're dealing with in a number of other ways with yourself as an organisation. So I guess the detail of all those intersections was kind of left out. And
it wasn't as clear as it could have been, yeah.
And my final kind of concern is and especially with one of our ex-staff members, senior staff members being involved in it, going out for consultation over Christmas over such an important thing.
Yep.
Because we're all on board with regards to the safety issues on Brougham Street. There's no question about that, but it's issues onto and into the community. So I guess, sorry for the rattle along, but they are real. They've been kind of there for a long time.
So through the chair, I'd suggest we beef up point number 4. Instead of saying we are concerned, we say we're very concerned about the fact that it went out over Christmas, and we actually put it right up front, page 1, say it isn't an ideal time. You don't get the best response and the community feels a bit disengaged, and that's effectively what we're saying there, but we say it a bit stronger.
Thank you.
I also think in that sort of background we put an additional, we've got it through the document, but we put an additional paragraph in there saying, talking about the work that needs to be done on the surrounding streets, the tie into the fact that the MPS has come out now. It is going to have an effect on the development in the area, all the land use. It's in there, but we lift it up and we bring it forward in the document. We also close the document with a bit more of a summary around those key points. I think a couple of other points you raised with us as council over the last few days has been our climate change goals. The big one is the impact on surrounding the impact that it has on the local road network, we can pull forward the safety concerns around not allowing people to turn right down Selwyn Street is a big one, and that link with the cycleways on the other streets. And our request to have Waka Kotahi actually prioritise that as a program of works. We'll do that, so we'll bring it forward in those two positions, right at the start and then close with it right at the end as well, because I think it's important that Waka Kotahi help us work with the community to get the best outcomes.
Thank you, because I know that the climate issues are huge, but at the forefront of the people in the community, and we've been dealing with it with you guys, and it's been really good on Selwyn Street, etc. But the forefront of all the concerns is the number one thing is the community is safety.
Yes.
And so, you know, and I think we don't want to be suddenly holding all the responsibility of those side roads, because I think our community needs to be engaged with Waka Kotahi, because they kind of leave communities out. I don't care what people say, they do. We're the experts in it, we know them, we live with them. But Waka Kotahi seems just to put roads, the big roads through and leave it to others. So I think we can't do that here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've got Melanie and then Anne.
Just a quick question, you might not be able to answer it because they're not really the right people to be asking as Waka Kotahi, but for those T2 lanes, are they actually envisaging trucks will be there or not?
No.
No, okay, good.
Anne?
Yeah, kia ora, just are we giving a strong enough message through the submission to Waka Kotahi about the need to look at the wider issue of the traffic coming from Rolleston, Lincoln, Prebbleton, and the congestion that it's causing on Broome Street? For example, are they considering putting land aside for park and ride? And can we strengthen that message?
Yes. Yeah, I think we do strengthen that message. It is in there around them having some projects on to look at the length of the corridor, basically from Rolleston to the port in the future, and how they manage, they either use managed lanes, they look at safety, especially out towards in the already established areas. But again, I think we could beef that up in that last summary section, re-summarise the key points and what we do in the submission, which will help them as well in the long run.
Thank you.
That's great. I've got Yanni.
Just I'm just wondering if we've got any evidence, like, because we did a lot of work initially around the investment case, around supporting the signalised pedestrian crossing for Wilson's Road across Broome Street, because it's really close to that Apawa Road, Broome Street intersection, and it just seems to me really quite weird just to add a pedestrian crossing unless we've got good evidence of people crossing at that point.
Wanting to cross at that point, I agree. What we have highlighted in the submission is, and we could maybe lift it a little bit, is the necessity for them to really look at where the pedestrian desire lines are, rather than where it's easy to put crossing points.
Because making
so I think maybe we lift that up a little bit.
And certainly support making that Apawa Road, Broome Street intersection safer for everyone would be really important.
Scope, isn't it?
But, that's right on the edge, so
okay, we can double check that and make sure we just highlight that. I do want to raise the point, it probably goes back to what Councillor Scandrett said as well, is Waka Kotahi have been focused on trying to get that cross movement improved as well. So if we can help them achieve that, then we should. So if Wilson's is not a known desire line, then we probably should raise it.
I just don't know who would have that information, like what's informing some of the projects that they've put forward.
Look, it's unlikely that we have the information because it's their project and their road, so they've done it. But I can't answer it for.
And just to be clear, we've also made reference to the Garlands Road section, even though it's out of scope, to say that we are concerned about the impact.
We'll talk about the wider corridor from the port to Rolleston, and we will use that as an example. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Pauline.
Thank you. Look, I'm pleased to see number 21 that you strengthened that about the possibility that we may have to bring forward some safety improvements from our own program. Would we be wanting to put a quantum in there, a figure in there, or a range?
No, I think we'd be remiss if we did that at this stage.
Okay.
If we've learnt anything from CNC, it's usually more than we expected.
We'll think of a figure and then triple it. And the other
Probably
thing
not
is
enough.
just a question about the overhead pedestrian cycle bridge. I don't know what number it is. It's down further. It's Simeon and Collins, I think, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's where does it go?
Yep, that is right.
So how can you make that accessible? Are you thinking mobility scooters and things? How would you do that?
An overbridge. It needs to have ramps rather than steps.
So it'd have to be incredibly long, so they're not too steep. Because this would be a very high bridge.
There's design standards that need to be met, and they all take into account accessibility requirements.
Okay, and so I think we
can't-
need to make that really strong, a clear point that's really important, that it is accessible to everybody then, because it will cost more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, that's business as usual for NZTA. They wouldn't be building up steps. It's not. They're the same as us.
Okay.
In that they work to the same set of standards.
Yeah. Thanks.
Right. That's everyone. So it's been moved by Mike. Oh, sorry, Aaron. My apologies.
That's all right. So, Lynette, from our first presentation we had around this through to now, my first question is, what's the total cost of the project?
I think they've allocated 90 million.
Something in the order of 90 million.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, what's the intention that Waka Kotahi are trying to achieve here? What's the intention of the $90 million spent is to...
As to this is a known congestion corridor through the city.
Yes. Yeah.
It is about working to address, to start addressing some of their climate change goals, and also to improve safety and accessibility along the corridor.
So
one of the other goals is also to improve movements for freight.
Yes.
So it is a corridor between the inland port and the port.
And our own one says that this doesn't improve the freight flow
At this stage it doesn't, but it does a lot of other things around trying to improve congestion and safety.
And is that there's a section of Bram Street, you probably know what it is, but I don't know the exact streets, but is that our most congested road in the city?
I don't know off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
It'd be close to it, wouldn't it? So
it is very congested and it's very busy.
no,
and it's
definitely
not our road.
Cranford.
It's not our road, it's their road.
Yeah, but of the roads that go through our city, that's the most
One of them.
congested.
One of them
So
is.
I didn't see anything in here that shows that congestion will be relieved. What can you highlight?
There
what
is-
that is?
It isn't in this. This is a submission on the proposal that they've put forward. That information will be in their proposal. They are looking to improve safety, one of the issues with Bram Street is the barrier it creates to north-south movements. So a lot of the issue with Bram Street is actually getting across Bram Street, not getting along it.
Oh no, not if you.
Yes, it is about north-south movement. So they're working on that as well. But so there are things that they've achieved through this and improving the north-south movements versus the east-west. So maintaining your east-west movements along the corridor while improving what's going across. So there are improvements at the intersections to achieve that. There's safety improvements. A lot of it is tied up in the intersection improvements.
Right. So
My understanding, but this is Waka Kotahi's project. We are trying to put a submission into it.
Yeah.
The detail of it you have discussed it previously with Waka Kotahi.
Yeah, because if it's to
can't-
increase that flow and both ways, there was an old program of doing 4 major flyovers. Where's that at? Is that in the long term?
Grade separation has been discounted as part of the business case, and we have discussed this with you
At the
before.
moment.
It has been discounted as part of the business case, because it is very intrusive and extremely expensive, and it's very disruptive to communities. So it will sever communities entirely.
But that.
And it's exceptionally
debatable.
expensive.
I got them through my ward, and it's fine. But
we're not going to include in our submission to Waka Kotahi that they revisit that decision.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
We agreed with them on that decision.
We don't have advice.
Okay, and with that, because there's a lot of reference to the T2, have we seen any evidence that T2 will help reduce carbon emissions? Or it has worked to do that?
The point of T2s is to reduce the number of single occupancy trips that people use in their cars. So you get more benefit if you've got more than one person in a car and you're not sitting in your car on your own. And that is, there's heaps of evidence, but I don't have it with me today.
Yeah, it would be good to see that at some point and see where in New Zealand and where overseas that has worked, because I've been to plenty of places where the only lane that flows is the T2 lane and all the others are full.
Yep.
And the T2 one's empty, so it's clearly not working, because someone who lives in Rolleston that starts working town at 8 doesn't try and find someone in their neighbourhood that might leave at the same time. Their own wife might work somewhere else, because Christchurch is very spread. We don't have a centre city that's working, so.
Yeah, these are all the issues that we're addressing.
Yeah, and hence we've asked in
wider
this
business case.
We've asked in this for them to have an ongoing project to look at how it gets all the way from Rolleston and how they manage that and actually reduce the number of cars that need to make trips. Make it possible for people to not take a single occupancy trip to get into town.
But
that's what we've got to work on, and that's the
Mass Rapid Transit business case as well.
Yes,
but those people already have that option.
That is the Mass Rapid Transit business case as well. This is focusing on the Broome Street submission. So I understand what you're making the point about, but it's not the issue for this submission.
No, it's not.
What I'm trying to get to the nub of the questions is it's $90 million that doesn't meet any
We don't
goals.
make the decision about Waka Kotahi's project.
Yeah, the money's going to be spent, and the money's been committed by the Crown for this project. We need to comment on this project.
But if we think it's not going to achieve any of the goals, then we should speak up and say this won't get freight to the port.
There is a detailed submission that's attached about our concerns about elements of the approach, but we do have an underlying concern about a number of the congestion and the crossing issues. And you've heard that from the councillors, the ward councillors, about the challenges that they have. So, I mean, I'd much rather that we have the debate about it.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
All right, so it's been moved by Mike and seconded by Celeste, that's right. So I'll open it up for debate. Tim.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank our staff for working on. They've been working on this for a very long time, and I really appreciate it. It's your frustrations and much of the time as well. Yeah, the comment with regards to what is the issue with Broome Street, it is the south-north crossings, because if you can picture a red light, 3 vehicles pull up, a B train, a private car and a bus, there is physically no way they can take off at the same time and stay together till the next set of lights. And I should also mention, I think there's 16 sets of lights on this stretch of road. So I don't think there'd be a freight transport corridor meant to have ease of transport of freight from inland port to a port that would have that disruption. So that's just a fact of life. And so I really appreciate you trying to look after the communities on either side. I don't think Wakatahi has done the same. I think they look at the south-north transit as a problem, which it is, but they don't deal with the communities. And I was really disappointed that they decided to do, as we know, the consultation over the Christmas period, which I personally think is pretty insulting as the way we go forward. I have a lot of concerns for our communities, and my main concern is the safety, and I really appreciate Wakatahi and our own staff on this. However, I don't want us and the ratepayers of Christchurch lumbered with trying to fix problems that are created by traffic in communities that are now being pushed on with regards to intensification, and it's our ratepayers that will spend the next decade trying to fix it and cope with the safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks. Like, I'm completely in support of the intent of this council submission, and I hope that Waka Kotahi NZTA take it seriously and actually think about putting the physical works on hold until further work's being done in collaboration with council in response to our submission points. I think councillors, the community board, and a lot of the communities, especially in Addington, were pre-consulted with Waka Kotahi, and I appreciated this a lot. But a lot of the detail, especially around the intersection changes, was either glossed over or missed completely during that process. I find that extremely disappointing, especially when one of these was the right-hand turn into Selwyn Street. Now, you may remember that residents and the local MP fought for several years to get that put in, and to remove this is actually a slap in the face to the community. I'm aware Council and Waka Kotahi staff collaborate on studies and issues, one of these being the Morehouse-Brougham investment case that's mentioned, and it seems again disappointing Council staff have not had the opportunity or assistance from Waka Kotahi to model and understand the effects of the proposed changes on Council's surrounding streets. Therefore, in the submission, we requested additional funding from Waka Kotahi, and I think that's really, really necessary. And that includes proposals that Waka Kotahi's put in when they've discussed with us, things such as bus lanes on Selwyn Street to connect the south up to the city, and also that cycle lane on Gasson Street they've talked to us about. So when this project starts as well, I do request Waka Kotahi work with council and include elected members alongside the community of Addington when they do the design of the pedestrian overbridge that they've agreed to do together. That'll join the two sides of Addington together. The effects on surrounding communities are key in this project, and I do feel like they've been overlooked for too long.
Sarah?
Kia ora. Thanks so much, and thanks for all your work on this. There are some really good things about this proposal. A lot of the safety improvements I think are really good, but the submission outlines some concerns we've got on those as well. Shared paths aren't ideal, especially when they're really narrow, all of those kind of things. But for me, the climate impact's a really big one, and the climate assessment impact for this particular NZ upgrade project makes it really clear, if you read it, that the only way that there will be a decrease in carbon emissions through this project, which is what they're saying it'll have, is by the switch from single occupancy to T2. And there is nothing currently in their plan which actually encourages people to switch to T2 and makes it a really attractive option for people. If people don't switch to T2, the lane is unused and carbon emissions go up and people are stuck in traffic even longer. And so I think that the strengthening of the submission to make sure that they look at extending the T2 lane to Rolleston and have enforcement in place, I think is really key. I'm really concerned that just adding an extra lane is going to attract more traffic like it has in many overseas countries and actually won't achieve their goals. So I think that really needs to be looked at. Thanks.
All right, so we'll put that motion. Sorry, Aaron and then Phil.
Yeah, I from the start of this project and what Waka Kotahi come to show us, on behalf of a lot of ratepayers in the city and taxpayers, I'm incredibly disappointed. $90 million to not increase the traffic flow for people and for freight on a main traffic route, probably the main traffic route in Christchurch, is appalling and is a slap in the face. For anyone who thinks that our population is going to get smaller, dreaming. Christchurch will head at some point towards 500,000 people living in Christchurch itself and the greater area. Canterbury's already heading for 600,000, and Canterbury will eventually be 1 million people. This is the main freight route to the port. This is a main route through the city. It needs to flow, and whatever it takes to do that should be done. When it comes to things like safety, when a main road doesn't flow, other vehicles will rat run, and rat running is dangerous, and that's putting trucks and other vehicles trying to get somewhere, because this is natural human behaviour. People work, people have goods to deliver, people have something to do. We can think and dream all we want that we can change their behaviours, but there is natural human behaviour based on thousands of years of evolution. We went from the horse to the vehicle will change, the fuel will get cleaner, but people will still be moving themselves and goods around cities forever until humans are gone. So to think otherwise is just not true. So it is our role to facilitate the way that a city wants to move, not try to dictate to them the way we want them to move. And that will reduce carbon and help save the planet.
Phil.
Yeah, what he said. The only thing, one of the things is, it's as Lynette said, it's Wakatahi's road. They have done a lot of work on it. I think they should be left to do their own thing. One of the things that really worries me is item 27, where we are like insurance that there'll be on-road cycle lanes for the commuter cyclists. This road has not got enough room in it now. Even if they put it out to the 6 lanes, there's still not going to be enough room. Commuter cyclists should be the ones that should be encouraged to go and rat run somewhere else on another road, and we keep them off there. Keep them, let them go on the shared pathway, which is cool. And I understand they go fast, and we've got to be careful. They should be the ones to be encouraged to go somewhere else, because as Aaron said, this is the main drag for the port and a lot of other things. So I don't agree with item 27, particularly for one, and I think that transit should be just allowed to do what they want to do, and hopefully they'll listen to some of the things we talk about, but I don't agree with all of the submission. Thank you.
I just think that I just would like to contribute to the debate. Oh, well, I'll wait till after Yanni. Yanni?
The frustration is that after the earthquake, we had a freight action plan, Greater Christchurch Freight Action Plan that was developed. Brougham Street was identified as being the critical freight corridor. And I just want to echo the concerns that have been raised around if you don't improve the access for freight, the freight goes through the side streets. So a number of people I've got in like Bromley and in Wolfston, one of the biggest complaints is the heavy vehicles going through residential neighbourhoods where there's children going to school, where there's local kids playing, and the speed of the heavy vehicles and the impact on shaking the houses because of the inefficient state highway network that goes through the area. I mean, for example, the fact that we allowed a plan change in Kenaway for a huge industrial area, 10,000 extra traffic movements, many of them heavy, and then there's no direct access to the state highway where they all have to go through in these big sort of loops around. It's just insane. So, I do have a lot of sympathy for the fact that we should be trying to improve Brougham Street for freight, because the impact that we have on other parts of our network by not having efficient freight movement is really undesirable. And there's a lot of complaints that I've had in my area from people around the impact of that. I also think it's kind of concerning, although we've raised the issue around the minimum width of a cycle lane. The problem is that, like, if you go to Gasson Street at the moment, it's the vehicle lane that's too narrow for the size of vehicles that are using that space. So if they just use the existing road corridor and try to cram more stuff in, and we try and put a wide range of different activities in the same roading corridor as a city and as a country, it creates a lot of danger and a lot of conflict. And I think that's the fundamental problem here. Whereas Brougham Street, we're trying to do too many things with the road that creates a less satisfactory outcome for everyone involved. And I just think we need to, as a city, really think about the purpose of these roads and how they can be more efficient. So I'm really concerned at a number of things in this program where it just seems to counteract so we put safety improvements in, but then we delay the freight movement, and then we just encourage rat running through local areas. And with Google Maps, I think what people also need to understand is with technology, people actually get told to go rat running when there's delays. So, it's very hard to address, but I am really concerned about this project and the impact that it will have for a number of reasons.
So just the comment I wanted to make was that the council's been asked to make a submission on the Wakatahi project, and what the very strong message that we are sending back is that the total cost of the project must include the downstream effects. If we've learnt nothing from what happened with the Northern Corridor, it is that. there is no reason why the people of Christchurch, the hard-working, rate-paying residents of Christchurch, should meet the costs of these wider impositions on the central city. Now, we expect that our central city has to be, because you have to go through the city to get to the port from the south and also from the north. So we understand that, but there are downstream effects and they should be included in the total cost of the project, and that's very strongly made in the submission. So I'm very appreciative of staff for the hard work that they've put into making a good submission. Thank you.
Just really wanting to reinforce that message as well, that this is an opportunity for Waka Kotahi to actually take a much wider look at the whole network that feeds into Brougham Street, and we have to start addressing the amount of traffic that's coming through from Rolleston, Templeton, Lincoln, and dealing with that. So this is a very specific part of a network, but we have to keep encouraging Waka Kotahi to look at the wider issues and to work with them to solve those. So, thank you.
Mike, do you want to wrap up the debate?
Yeah, thank you. Look, like you've said, Mia, this is not our project. This is Waka Kotahi's project. But obviously, we're a key stakeholder, and it does affect our wider network and many communities that this corridor goes through. And yes, it is an important link to the port, the seaport, especially with the inland ports. And so moving freight through there efficiently is important, but we can't forget that actually what is really important for us is our communities and the safety of our communities. And I think some of the aspects of this design does address some of those safety concerns. I've had a couple of meetings with individuals in the Addington community, and that they're quite grateful that the at-grade crossing has been removed. Now we know a person on a bike was killed at that crossing, so it's actually very, very good and they're pleased. But yeah, they are very concerned with other aspects of this design and how it will sever their community that's already quite fragile. And I think we can't lose track of that while this is a road for cars, it is impacting communities and the communities around it, and we need to be very aware of that. Safety is important. We need to get that right, but we can't sever a community even more than what has been severed. It's a little bit disappointing that I'm hearing councillors encouraging people to drive more to decrease carbon. I'm not too sure where that information is coming from. Look, and I get the concerns of Yanni. There are wider impacts, so it's really important that we look and hopefully get Waka Kotahi to actually come on board if they're trying to put this program through, which they see will only really work if we do certain projects, that actually they fund us appropriately to be able to do them sooner rather than later, so it actually lines up. I share Melanie's concerns about the impacts that some of these turn-in restrictions will have, and I noticed there's also a turn-in restriction that the Central Linwood Heathcote Community Board added in, which was quite surprising. I think one of the things that has disappointed me with this is really not only the timing of this consultation over the school holiday period, when such an important community, the Addington school community has just really, they're trying to go through. It's been a hard year, and now they have a break and they have to do this consultation. It is also the just the major impact it's having on everyone's lives out there. There is major concern with what this will do to them. So I support our submission. I think it's a strong submission. It's outlining our concerns, our desire for Waka Kotahi to actually do this better, to actually ensure that their information they supply is a little bit more realistic. I think that's. I get 5 minutes because I was the mover.
No.
I think that was one of the biggest concerns I had. When you look at the information they supply, their front page on their website shows this beautiful tree-lined 4-lane street with absolutely no cars. It's misleading. Their information they've been given to the communities has been misleading. I think that's one of the most disappointing aspects of this project. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. So Sam McDonald, James Goff, Catherine Chu, Phil Major and Aaron Cowan.
Just the anti-community
Thank
councillors.
you. Right, that's carried. So now I'll move back to the debate on the removal of library fines. I'll go on to PX after this one is resolved. So this has been moved and seconded, moved by Sarah Templeton, seconded by Celeste Donovan. Is that right? No, Mike Davidson. That's that one. Right, so I'll open it up for debate. Do you want to open the debate?
The removal of financial barriers to enable access to our core library services is the right thing to do, and it speaks clearly to the values that we hold as a council and as a city. We've talked a lot about why we have the fines and why we might get rid of the fines, but not about why we have libraries. And keeping the big picture in mind is important. Libraries are the last warm public place in the city where people are welcome with no expectations of having to spend money. They enable a better educated and a better informed community, provide recreation and books that allow every resident to escape reality for a few hours without a screen, and provide a warm, safe space for people to connect. This is well supported by the community, and we've heard from the deputation today, and I've had contact from many of them outlining the experiences and how the fines themselves have disadvantaged them and their families, but also how just the thought of getting a fine if something unexpected comes up and books are returned late is enough to put them off accessing our wonderful libraries. This was across the age ranges, from students through to the retired. We've invested a significant amount in our libraries, and the absolute best thing is in getting as many residents using them as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Melanie, Anne.
Our council's vision is that Christchurch is a city of opportunity for all. Therefore, it follows as a council we should use every means available to increase access to libraries. And I'm really pleased that Professor Hayward acknowledged that in the long-term plan we decided just to not reduce library access by closing libraries earlier. It's completely clear that the evidence supports removing library fines. Local academics and the community support it, especially young people, and are the people who benefit most to the access to libraries and the services they provide. I wholeheartedly support this motion, and to quote Dr. Zeus, the more that you read, the more things you will know, and the more that you learn, the more places you'll go.
Anne?
Thank you. There are lots of quotes, good quotes about the values of libraries and reading. And one of them is, libraries will get you through times of no money. Better than money will get you through times of no libraries. And I think these are times when people are really facing some hard economic times and need places to go and things to do that aren't going to cost money. And I don't think many of us have felt the shame of being confronted in a public place with the fact that you can't take a book out because you haven't paid a fine. And imagine that as a parent with children standing nearby with a pile of books, even though they can get them out. So that shame is actually a real barrier, or that fear of being in that position is a huge barrier. And we've learnt that children can't go to the library without an adult if they're under 12. So what we're doing here is actually removing a very, very large barrier for people to enjoy and to really get value from the libraries, our wonderful libraries. So we must do this, especially at the moment with all the challenges that families are facing for our kids.
James, Phil, Jimmy, Tim.
Yeah, look, I'm supportive of children and the under 18s not incurring library fines, and I'm definitely not in favour of increasing the quantum of the fee for adults for late returns. You know, revenue foregone in one area means that it has to be raised from all ratepayers in another. And, you know, the financial impact equates to about 0.5% in rates increase to all unless something else is cut. But if we look past the financial element of it, I can imagine what's more distressing than incurring a library fine for a late return would be not being able to borrow the book that you want because someone hasn't had an added incentive to return it on time. But look, I don't like fines as much as anyone else. I hate them, in fact. But I think they're a necessary evil for adults to ensure equitable access to the library's collection for everyone else. But that being said, I really think this is a good issue to raise. I think the barriers and potential unintended consequences around fines are real. The problem is we know it's not a perfect system, but removing the fines for all with a stroke of a pen now, my fear is that we essentially kick the can down the road and are then required to try and sort a financial problem that's created elsewhere at some other time. So reviewing the library's fees and charges, including this concept, which I think is a good one, and thank you for bringing it, I think would be ideally placed as part of the fees and charges section of the long-term plan, which we're doing next month. That would then require us to undertake the good financial governance discipline of knowing where the foregone revenue is going to be supplemented from, and then we can have a less ad hoc and more strategic look at the matter in general. I think it's a good matter to raise. The barriers are real. They should be addressed. But I think by just doing something, like I said, with a stroke of a pen now, it just creates another problem, and it needs to be done holistically. And we've got a great place to do that, and it's the right time to do that. Annual plan is going out in draft form next month, and I think that would allow us to have the wider conversation and consider all of the implications of it at the same time. So I'll be voting against it. If there's other support for voting against it, then I'm happy to foreshadow a motion that it's dealt with as part of the annual plan.
Phil, Jimmy, Tim and Andrew.
Yeah, now, thank you. This may come as some surprise to Sarah, but I am actually supporting this. I sort of put it because it's a step in the right direction. If it gets more people back into our libraries, it's got to be a good thing. Gets people to take their children there. Our libraries are probably every bit as much a community centre as a library. I know the one in Eastgate, it certainly is. So if people go there and they buy a coffee or they chit chat to people, it's got to be good, and we're getting use of the buildings, which maybe not being used as much as they are. However, I see that there is a small increase in rates because of this, but I encourage my fellow councillors to try and trim the same amount off something else that's maybe not important in the annual plan, so that that it doesn't have the impact on. It'll have no impact on rates. So all we've got to do is trim 300 grand off something, and it can't be that hard. So thank you.
Jimmy, Tim, Andrew, Sam.
Yeah, and if we review the paragraph 5.6, 14% of these are the members, which all are the residents, even some of them is ratepayers, are unable to borrow any further items or access electronic resources. It's quite serious, quite serious. Also, we heard this morning all those three people submission, they particularly emphasize well-being to access council resources and service, and also the kind of equity. Our community outcome, particularly one of community outcome, resilient community, particularly highlight, strong sense of communities, active participation in civic life, and valuing the voices of all cultural ages. A moment we are all aware is kind of the uncontrollable environment, particularly even the COVID, or Omicron, etc. transmission so serious. To make the vulnerable family and people, and also for all those young people, etc. My particular concern, if we not remove all these fine overdue, whether council is breach, our community outcome, the resilient community, whether we are, we promise commitment, we are equally to give people access council resources and services. It's quite serious. But staff, they mentioned that we separate two kind of the cost. One is this year, from now on to the end of June, they have 100,000 kind of lost, plus the writing of $83,000, but they can control all this one. But regarding the 4 year, they put on the annual plan. So if we follow this process, my personal view regarding cost and effective and the impact, etc., I'm going to support this staff recommendation, particularly all the libraries. At the moment, it's really long. It's worldwide, quite famous library in worldwide and nationwide. So many the metro city council, district council, particularly even the USA and the UK, they all remove all those overdue. Why we are still stuck in there? This is my concern. We have to face this serious matter. Thank you.
I've got Tim, Andrew, Sam, and Jake.
Thank you. It's really, really simple for me. Literacy, education, and knowledge. Look at our prison system. Look at our society. If you are not educated, you will be at the bottom of the rung. It's worldwide. It's the fact of life. But if you're not literate, you can't use books. And if you can't use books, you are definitely going to remain on the bottom rung. That's just a fact. So for me, I think it's absolutely essential that we do everything we can and whatever we can to raise literacy in our community. It helps our society. Without education, you will not have knowledge. Knowledge improves the way you live, what you eat, how you live, and how you travel. It's absolutely essential. It increases your employment opportunities, which again helps our society. And so the councils around the table that are concerned with the 300,000, then I'd suggest we have a discussion with our libraries about what the essential use of a library is. What is the true key that will improve people's lives and lift them up that rung from poverty and from being at those baseline jobs and helping their children forward. I mean, I look at some of the things that we do and offer, which are wonderful, which are the 3D printing, the music, etc., which are really important to some people. But what is the core? Like a council, we can't be everything to everyone. And the economists' predictions with regards to interest rates doubling over the next 12 months, we have a huge amount of debt. So in the big picture, we've got to look at everything we're doing just as everyone else has to. So I'm absolutely supportive of this. And rather than kind of looking at cutting this because of 300,000, there are other ways we can do this. But this is the base essential to raising education in our society. So thank you very much.
Andrew, Sam, then Jake.
Thank you. I also support this. It is the right thing to do for the reasons that we've already heard a number of in the meeting today. We've heard examples of the effects of library fines, and there are examples in the report. And of course, that's exacerbated for those who can least afford to pay and who are most affected. Libraries are a service that we provide for our communities. They're not a revenue generator. And in that regard, accessibility, equity of access, focus on ease of use, and a focus on the service that we're providing to those in our communities that need it and appreciate it are the approach that we should be taking here. Libraries are a really important part of the social fabric of our communities, and it's for that reason that I support taking a progressive approach here, supporting equitable access and reducing the anxiety that we have heard described around library fines. Yes, we could leave this to the annual plan, but I'm pleased that we're able to deal with this today in order to implement what we now know to be a positive change as early as possible. So I'm going to be supporting this in its early implementation today.
Thank you, Sam, then Jake.
Thank you, Leanne, and thank you to Carolyn and Elaine for coming in. I think it's actually a really comprehensive report, so I do appreciate the work you've done on that, particularly around the alternative models as well. This has probably been a really good learning experience for me, in a sense that I actually would be the first to confess I don't know a lot about our libraries. I'm not someone that uses them that much. But I did think that after reading some of this stuff that potentially we were being inhumane with our treatment of people. But, it's been really reassuring, I guess, in the questions today to confirm that there's already a structure in place to wipe things when people are at their lowest point. So, having read the report and then actually contextualising it with the people that do it every day, I've got a really high degree of comfort that the personal personal responsibility element that exists now works, and that at the same time, when people are at their lowest, they can have a conversation with, I think, compassionate people within our libraries who can work with them. You know, I don't think we need to rush to change this. I think the system works, and actually that the wider ratepayer public would expect a bit of tension to be in that system for assets they effectively own. And the books are the community's assets. And so everyone has the responsibility in a personal sense to return them. There will be instances where someone is crook or, you know, ultimately can't get them back in time. And I think that quite rightly, management have delegation and discretion to fix that now. But if we were to go down this path, then does that mean we remove parking fines and the like? And I'm probably not one that's overly keen on doing that, because I think there needs to be tension in the system from a local authority like ours. And, you know, the balance is about right now, so I won't be supporting it.
Jake?
While I'm fully supportive of the removal of the abolition of this punitive and regressive fine, and let me be the first to congratulate Councillor Templeton personally for taking the bull by the horns on this matter. I mean, it's fantastic when members take ideas to council via notice and motion. I am a little concerned that this may not be the most appropriate way to approve new funding. And I believe that when the process is not quite right, you should say so, whether or not the substantive matter is one you agree with or not. In fact, you have a greater responsibility to say so, particularly on the matters you wholeheartedly agree with. There's a good reason we go through a budgetary process for new funding, because although this is clearly a social good, there are many other social goods. And some aren't as sexy as this, and they need to get a look into too. But anyway, enough negativity from me. This is clearly the right thing to do and a great step forward in the social progress of our city.
Thank you. Pauline?
Oh, thank you. Look, just bearing in mind the time and energy to actually retrieve these fines is phenomenal, and the cost to the council, to the library staff, is not to be undermined, as we discussed today. And so I just think that with the report stating that the evidence shows that the removal of fines encourages both the return of books and people to the library is a really important point to consider. And also Bronwyn Hayward, when she spoke to us, and she said that and outlined there are very few places for middle teens to hang out with others. And when they do have safe places like the libraries to hang out, this actually is proven to reduce youth crime, and it increases well-being. Those two things themselves together equate to a dividend to our city. And so to me, that offsets the money that this may cost, the small amount of money this may cost us. So yes, it could have gone to the annual plan, but I think actually dealing with this today is going to bring it in earlier than the annual plan would be implemented in June. So bring it in now, get the people into the library, look after those kids, and have a better place to live.
Celeste?
I mean, I support this because it's the right thing to do. Sorry. Okay. So I support this measure because it's the right thing to do, and also because the evidence supports it. We've heard from staff that there's no evidence that overdue charges provide an incentive for those returning items on time. So if this is the case, then we've got to consider what is the value of fines, aside from generating revenue largely from those that can least afford it. What we know is that overdue charges create a barrier to library usage, negatively impact members of our community who are lower in fixed incomes, whereas removing fines has clear benefits, as we've heard, and it puts us in line with the majority of councils around New Zealand. So, like I said, I support this measure, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because the evidence we've been presented supports it. So thank you, Councillor Templeton, for putting it forward.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. I too support the removal of these fines. I do think the timing would be better to be done from the 1st of July, so it actually gives us time to adjust our annual plan. But appreciate that that's not in the resolution today, but it does seem to me a bit weird. Like, you know, we do need to kind of think about what the annual plan process is versus changes we make during the year, and how that relates to it. So as long as we're consistent, I think that's the key thing around our process, so that the community knows that we do handle things in a fair way, regardless of what your view is in terms of either supporting this or being against it. But I just want to signal that, the other problem, and it's really interesting to read some of the comments that people say, we're happy to pay replacement costs, but when the payment notice arrived, there's a huge processing fee on it, which is much more than the books were worth, and a processing fee repeated for each book. Talking to other parents who had a similar issue, they've been forced to pay this exorbitant charge. So if we really believe in creating greater access to our libraries for all the reasons that we've heard today, I think we also need to be mindful of the other processes we have, particularly if we remove the fines and see that there's a lot more books or an increase in the number of books that are not being returned and being lost, because that cost is far more excessive than what some of the fines are. So I just wanted to flag that as an issue that we do need to think about as part of the draft annual plan, and I'll certainly be putting some questions in that regard. I think the benefit of, if we do go for the 1st of March, is that we'll have some time to look at what happens and possibly see some of the implications of the policy change. But I just think we should, as a council, get in the practice of consulting and talking to our communities when we make levels of service changes that there's a public interest in. And I am a bit concerned that some of our processes don't often allow the community to engage with us. But in terms of this, I'm very supportive of it. I think the report's excellent. It does list out all the key reasons why this is a beneficial thing to do.
Look, I think before I go back to Sarah, the thing for me was that, when this issue came up, it was simply a question of, an item to be considered within the annual plan. But after, we'd asked prior to asking for the report that we've had from staff today, it became obvious that there was an opportunity to bring it in earlier, and that is completely in order for the council to do so. There were a couple of points that I wanted to make. I don't think that the amount that looks, that is subtracted from the budget in terms of revenue is a true net cost, because the cost of enforcement, all of the issues that Yanni raises, they're on the other side of the ledger, but they don't sit within the library's budget. They sit elsewhere. And that's one of the issues. And I think we should tease that out, as Councillor Johansson has highlighted. We should tease that out in the annual planning process, because, it's the same thing can be said of parking fines. You get revenue on one side, but you never see the costs of enforcement, because they're included in a different budget. So I just think we just probably do need to think about those things. But I have heard people say that this will incentivise poor behaviour and not returning books. The evidence is completely the opposite. And so when this came up as an issue, I've obviously spent a lot of time on Dr. Google, like others have as well. And I found those points about more time for library staff to work with the public, reduces bad interactions with the public, and reduces inequities. But all of the evidence shows that removing the fines makes no difference to coming back. With parking, it's completely the opposite. And I found a reference to the Pittsburgh Parking Authority taking away parking fines. And this was the quote from an observer: "Remember how downtown suddenly looked like it was being run by an irresponsible teenage valet, with cars parked willy-nilly next to hydrants and intersections, let alone the time that people spent parked on the side of the road." The purpose of parking fines is actually to get people turning over. The purpose of library fines? So I just don't think that there's an easy comparison. The reality is that removing them actually increases the number of books that come back, because that's what's often holding people from bringing them back. Sarah, do you want to close off the debate?
So I'd like to start by thanking staff for the report, and to there's one over there before I wind up.
Sorry? Oh, I looked around the room.
Look, it's easy for some councillors from their position of privilege to find reasons to talk and vote against this. the desire to create attention that will always negatively impact the more vulnerable people in our communities. I will be supporting the removal of library fines. We know that having library fines does create barriers, not just for adults, but also children who are currently exempt from these fines. Additionally, we're very aware of the benefits that other councils have seen from removing library fines. Thanks.
Sarah?
Thank you. So I'd like to thank staff for the report and to colleagues who've spoken in favour and response. And I'd like to respond to the comments and assertions made against. The personal responsibility argument is fine for those with ready resources, but we know that not everyone, everyone has the best intentions when they get book out. But life happens. Kids are sick, the car needs repairs, people are called into work, extra shifts, or mobility is limited, especially for our older residents or the disabled. Even Councillor Goff has books that have returned late. Incurring fines for what were free book rentals leads to debt collection agency involvement, credit rating impacts, and disadvantages those who have the least. Just the thought of this happening puts people off getting books out, even if they don't currently have an outstanding fine. When people are at their lowest, we have heard clearly, they do not have the capacity to approach staff, and the thought of approaching staff in a public place and to tell distressing personal stories puts them off returning at all. Treating people going through tough times and struggling financially as a revenue source is not how council should operate. And if getting rid of the financial barriers to our libraries, and it shouldn't be a quid pro quo, we'll only do it if. We should just do it, and then look at efficiencies during the annual plan anyway, like we always do. Councillors McClellan and Johansson have concerns around process, and I'd like to remind them that this is the staff report that they voted in favour of last year, and I'd like to encourage them to vote in favour and not let those residents with financial barriers to access our libraries to languish for an additional 6 months before they can gain access. It's also interesting that Councillor Goff is concerned at a $300,000 decision today without being able to have a full, robust and detailed look at our finances in conjunction with the annual plan. Frankly, it's hypocritical, as he brought a notice of motion with a $50 million impact to council last year outside the annual plan process and was quite happy to approve it then and kick the can of financial implications down the road. Let's remove the financial barriers to access and allow our residents, young, old and in between, to access the information, recreation and connection that our libraries provide.
Thank you.
And let's do it now.
Thank you. Right. I mean, clearly there's a different.
No, but you
view,
voted for the early works. Yeah.
Can we get someone to call the motion? Sorry. So I'm putting the motion, and it's if we can.
Councillor Cure. Councillor McClellan.
Aye.
Councillor MacDonald.
No.
Councillor Davidson.
Aye.
Councillor Galloway.
Yes.
Councillor Scandrett.
Yes.
Councillor Chu. Councillor Coker.
Yes to Dom, Josiah and Bronwyn.
Councillor Cotter. Aye. Councillor Chen.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Templeton.
Aye.
Councillor Major. Deputy Mayor Turner.
Yes.
Councillor Johansson.
Yes.
Councillor Donovan.
Yes.
Councillor Goff.
No.
So 13 for yes and 4 for no.
I declare that carried. I'll just now move that we exclude the public for the reasons identified in the agenda. Do I have a seconder for that? Tim Scandrett. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Oh, who said no? Yanni. Can you note that Yanni said no to the going into PX?
And Sarah, I'll have you know that my library account is unblemished. It is George's one that has been sullied with the late returns.
Kia ora and good afternoon. I'd like to welcome Barry Bragg, who's the chair of the board, to the meeting this afternoon, and Alistair Pearson. And if I could invite you, Barry, to make your initial presentation, and then we can address the debate.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for the workshop on Tuesday. The purpose of the workshop was to share with you the information behind the design and reconcile that design relative to the project brief, and to talk about the way forward. We received some excellent feedback that we will be taking through to develop design. The other opportunity was to give you an update on the program, the risks, the value management that's taken place, and also the forecast risks around cost. So the purpose of this recommendation is just a short recap on some of the key slides to inform the resolution. So just summarising again the roadmap. So in December 2019, the council approved the project brief and proof of concept. Some of the enabling works were approved in 2020, and they have been completed. The PCSA contract went to market, and B6 WATPAC or Kotui B6 WATPAC were appointed for the pre-contract services agreement. On the 22nd of June, there was a concept design presentation. After several meetings on the 12th of August, the council resolved to reset the project and lay out the design principles that we took through to prelim design. On the 9th of December, we presented the statement of intent, the assurance program, and the authorities which were approved. And the council also approved the early works strategy, which was designed as a mitigation to the program and cost risks that we are seeing with the project. The prelim design presentation is an opportunity to be fully informed about the prelim design and give us some feedback on the material matters that we need to take forward to develop design. So in a moment, I'll get Alistair to recap what we will be doing during develop design, but at a high level, there will be some extensive stakeholder engagement around the interior and exterior design. Kotui will be engaging with the market around the construction methodology and getting further cost and program updates, which we will bring forward to a presentation in April around develop design, and then we will receive a final bid and proposal from Kotui in May, which we will be presenting with a recommendation to council in June. Alistair?
Cool. You just pretty much told the slide really, Barry, but anyway, I'll just press it again. Just for a clarity again, the design principles that were established at concept design stage have now been completed through the preliminary design stage. We are moving into develop design. Within develop design, we will continue that detailed stakeholder briefing. We get a clear understanding of each of the building elements now. We have that nomination of materials and systems that will be worked on through that develop design phase. And more importantly, we've got the coordination of the design amongst all of the building elements. So this is about clash mitigation now, about the actual physical build of the structure. And again, just to confirm that our market input has been ongoing throughout this process, and our engagement has been ongoing throughout this process, which has informed the methodology and the construction timeline. We're also confirming availability of materials, but also capability within the market, and what the subcontractor market requires as the preferred model to market. We're finalising the construction methodology, and again that evolves throughout the develop design phase. The techniques and the programme are part and parcel of that process. And the early works strategy that was adopted in December last year is underway, with the closure of the tender for the ground improvement work is this month, with an expectation that starts in April this year. So with a handover of the site in March this year. So work is underway to mitigate and give some surety towards risks that we've already highlighted through the briefing sessions. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk through 3 slides. Just wanted to sort of say that the south is obviously that top right-hand corner. This image highlights the form of the arena itself within the precinct and the designation. You can see the extent of the structure itself, which is the skeletal structure that sits around the building. This has been part and parcel of what's been developed in a great deal of detail throughout the preliminary design phase. It shows you the extent of the ETFE roof, which allows the light into the field of play, which allows for turf growth. And just as a marker, the transitional cathedral is in that northwest corner, which is the bottom left. And noting that the finishes and level and detail that will be applied to the external of this building is not yet defined, but it will be worked on throughout the DD. Next slide, please, Barry. A further image just giving you an indication from Latimer Square, looking from that northwest corner, looking up Madras Street and across to Hereford. This gives you this is a true life model of the building and how it sits within the designation. It shows you the size and scale. It's showing indicative public open space and alignment with the Madras Street and the Hereford Street works that have to be done. Next slide, Barry. Final slide from me. Just a good indication of what the interior looks like with the roof structure and the ETFE, giving that accessibility to natural light, airflow through the access vomitories, which are on the 4 points of the facility. This northern stage pocket is indicated in the bottom left-hand side, which is where our concert setup would establish, plus our 5,000 extra seats. So that's that grey area just to the bottom left. And then the field of play itself is the largest it can be. It's the international standard field of play. And on the right-hand side, you can see a few people mingling on the western terrace, and which is the western corporate terrace. So gives you a good feel for what the building looks like. The 2 white blobs, which are in the northeast corner and the southwest corner, are where the large-scale replay screens will be placed, which gives people full vision of replay across the facility. And that's me.
Caroline?
All right, thank you. So obviously we had a pretty detailed session on Tuesday, but the important part of where we're at the moment with design is to actually reconcile where the design is with what the intended outcomes were at the beginning. So the investment case, the strategic case, and those strategic venue design fundamentals. So a brief recap there. The design fundamentals are multi-use, genuinely multi-use covered arena, rectangle field of play with natural turf, a minimum of 30,000 seats, so 25 of those being permanent and 5 being temporary, and a minimum of 36,000 in concert mode. The ability to deliver corporate and flat floor events, quality acoustics, a level 1 U-shaped concourse and a northern stage pocket, and toilets on the ground floor concourse with food and beverage on both the ground floor and level 1 concourse. The strategic design fundamentals. So the venue needs to be commercially viable. It needs to attract events, attract visitors to the city, and the design must consider the future of events. So we must be able to be nimble, be agile, be able to actually shift and move, and for the venue design to be innovative. And then operationally functional, so the venue has to operate well. You have to be able to get in and out of it easily, move around it easily, and promoters and venue hirers need to be able to pack in and out. That's a fundamental part of a successful venue, is how quickly events can get in and out and move on. The guest experience, so fundamental is the guest experience. A lot of that is an outcome of operational functionality, but good access to amenities, plenty of amenities, good food and beverage, and good variety of food and beverage as well. Great acoustics, great seat comfort, good sight lines, all of those things that we've got a wonderful opportunity in designing this venue from the outset. And multi-use, again, this venue needs to be multi-use. It's not just about sporting events. So large concerts, small concerts, flat floor events. You think about expos on the concourse, small and large events in the function areas and on the terraces. So the venue needs to be able to deliver all of those things for the city. Revenue streams. So the baseline investment case talks about the type of events and the variety of events and the volume of those events. And you'll see there, that's a recap on what were the baseline investment case numbers and those revenue streams. So you think about commercial naming rights, ticketing partnerships, forage partnerships, signage, membership, advertising. There's plenty of opportunity in those baseline revenue streams, but also in addition to. So now that we've recapped on what were the intended outcomes, what is the preliminary design delivering? So prelim design is always going to still have a few work-ons. It's really natural at this phase in design to have a few work-ons, but the design is at a point where most of those things should be baked in. So we can confidently say that the commercial viability outcomes will be met. The design enables a good variety of events and all of those baseline investment types as detailed in the investment case. But it also enables future-proofing. So it enables the delivery of things like esports, which is the fastest growing sport in the world, digital billboards, external signage, and broader activation of the public realm. It also enables future tenancies. So there are a number of areas that remain, shell and core areas that remain able to be tenanted in the future, which is another revenue stream. Operational functionality. So the prelim design allows for good egress and ingress, smooth movement around the venue, and really good pack in and out for venue hirers, particularly that northern stage pocket is a fantastic outcome. And it also allows for some future-proofing. There's space in there for a second goods lift, which means that things can move around the venue more easily. Another design fundamental is turf health, absolutely fundamental to the success of the venue. The design delivers a rectangle field of play, obviously, with natural turf. And all of those things that need to be worked on to make sure that there's plenty of light, plenty of ventilation in a venue with a roof are obviously complicated, but the design is certainly at a point in time where that is enabled. The guest experience, so again, the guest experience is well and truly delivered with the current design. The seat sizes of an industry best standard, the sight lines similarly. There's really good quality acoustics for cut-down concerts and sporting events. The accessibility standards are of New Zealand Building Code standards, and there's a good number of suitably located food and beverage outlets as well. And there are future-proofing opportunities for guest experience as well. So thematic lighting is something that we could put in at a later date, as well as building out additional weather protection outside the venue for an enhanced guest experience. Sustainability, again, another design fundamental. The design well and truly enables good operational sustainable practices and incorporates good sustainable design practices. The design delivers an all-electric energy solution. So there are no fossil fuels used in the operation of the facility itself. And there are future-proofing opportunities also. The structure is being built in a way that will enable solar panels at a point in time, if not from the outset, and also a move to a fully reusable waste strategy. All right, so that's a revisit on the design fundamentals. And then just moving on to the name of the venue. So as we all know, the CMUA is really symbolic of post-earthquake recovery. It's the last of the anchor projects. It's a symbol of what has something that has really bonded the people of our community together. It's a highlight of that strength, that endurance, that resilience that has been so apparent in our community to date. We have already been, well, the venue has already been gifted the name Te Kaharoa, which is strength and endurance, and that is the name of the precinct. But the name CMUA has worked to date because it reflects exactly what the venue is, which is a genuine multi-use arena, but it isn't necessarily a name that resonates. And so now we've been asked to accept the name Te Kaha. Te Kaha again means strength. and it is a name that could carry, if it remains with the venue forever, that real symbol of enduring strength, and it could be reflected in the name forever, which I believe is a really powerful thing. I think it's a name that will connect with our community and is something that, in all fairness, it's easy to say. It's something that kia kaha was again another phrase that was used a lot actually post-earthquake. And as I said the other day, not to labour the point, but it really is an important symbol of what everyone has been through. And I think that's me.
So thank you. And as I said before, we're at the prelim design phase. We've presented a lot of information to support the resolution. We've had some really good feedback that we're taking through to the develop design phase. There's a lot of stakeholder consultation required during that period. We'll be back with our quarterly update under the Statement of Intent in March. We have another comprehensive update in April when we get to the develop design phase, and then on to a key decision for the design and construction contract in June. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thanks very much for that. And I'd also like to acknowledge staff that turned around a split between the two papers so that we could have a public-facing debate with all of the confidential stuff held in the place where it ought to be while contractual arrangements are entered into. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Yanni?
Are you able just to go through and just help highlight what the opportunities are for public consultation on the design and on any sort of future budgets?
So I can probably touch on engagement around design. I guess there's been plenty of stakeholder engagement, particularly from venue users around the design to date. As we move into develop design, that's the opportunity to now engage, even particularly around cultural narrative, the Pacifica community, how we can actually build some of those design elements into the interior and exterior design. And that's something that can happen in develop design. And so we've identified a range of all of those stakeholders, and we'll be mapping out those engagement points over the next couple of weeks that will actually map out the next couple of years.
Sorry,
but
I
really,
was just trying to understand. I appreciate the stakeholders. I'm more interested in the general community. Like, we had a huge number of people that signed a petition that obviously have an interest in it. What is the opportunity for a general public consultation engagement through this process?
So we need to take some guidance from council on how we would go forward with that. We are receiving a lot of feedback through community channels and through the key stakeholders that have been identified as the major stakeholders to engage with. So we're receiving a lot of that community feedback through them. But if you want us to undertake a separate process to that, you need to advise us that that's what you want us to do.
Yeah, well, it's not something that we're considering today. I mean, this is the preliminary design which needs to be adopted, and then we move on to the next phase. I'm really satisfied with the list of stakeholders and the fact that you're very open to getting feedback from the people who ultimately are going to be the end users of this amazing facility. And I really like the name. It's that strength that sits in behind it. It's really good.
So I had several other questions. Just wanted to understand in terms of the feedback that we've given. There's been some discussion about toilets. I've put a question around family rooms, for example.
Mm-hmm.
All those sort of little things. Are they able? They'll be incorporated as we go through the next phase, and so we'll get answers to what's possible. I know, for example, there was a lot of concern around the traffic assessment, around the number of people using Ubers or taxis compared to what we were presented with.
Yep, so two responses. We've had a number of questions, and we'll provide comprehensive feedback on all of those questions. And throughout this period from now through to April, we'll be engaging with the stakeholders on those issues, and we will make another comprehensive presentation on all of those matters when we present the developed design.
Right. Okay. And just the final question for I guess it's more of our staff, is if we do have to add additional money to the budget, at what point do we have an understanding about the level of consultation that's required?
Somebody, Alan?
Oh, so I'm just, and if we do have to add additional money to the budget that's currently not on budget, at what point do we get an understanding of what consultation will have to occur with our community?
As I mentioned before, we will need to come back to you on that response. We are currently reviewing that and seeing what impact that has.
And we will make sure that that is in plenty of time for you to be able to undertake any consultation that we are recommending to you anywhere near before you sign any contract.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
I've got Pauline and then Mike.
Oh, thank you. My question's around the accessibility features, which do have to be put into the very, very preliminary design, because often they're bigger doorways and openings, which I'm sure you're aware of. But you mentioned that we're using the New Zealand Building Code Accessibility Guide. Is that the best practice one in the world, or could we be using a higher standard?
Alistair?
Yeah. We've presented a couple of times, and Gilbert Gervais, as the technical director for B6 WATPACs, stood up and said on numerous occasions that we're designing to a standard because we have to meet a standard. That's the consent obligations that we've got to meet. We are, where we can, going another step. And part and parcel of our engagement with Council has been through the Accessibility Working Group, and we took a lot of great feedback from that working group. But also, I believe the feedback we received was that we had already included multiple areas and also seating positions, and what accessibility requirements we put within the design exceeded some of the people around that table, the expectation from the people in the room. So the intention from the feedback we've received today is that we attend more of those groups, the Accessibility Working Group in particular, the Sustainability Committee. We want to start providing and provisioning that information across the board in Council, and it's part of the objectives that we've got now through the board, that the board want to be open to what we're doing and how we're doing it and what we're doing and what more can we learn and what more can we adopt. I believe at the moment we've got a really good structure under the preliminary design that incorporates a lot of those aspects, but there's always tweaks that we can make, and that's why doing this now, accepting the preliminary design, working into developed design, taking on board all of that information can be absorbed into the current design team.
Great, thank you, that's encouraging. And my other question is that, I'm finding this building a lot more imposing and big than I anticipated it would be. If we hadn't increased the seating numbers, would it have been lower?
It would have, ultimately it would shrink slightly, but not massively, if you know what I mean. It still has to, it's the minimum height to kick from the field of play to the underside of the truss is still 32 metres. You still need that, and unfortunately the design height of the truss itself is around 15 metres. So, you're still going to have whatever the width of it, you've still got to deal with it through the structure. So you've still got to meet that 32 metre mark for the kicking, but you also need the depth of the truss might have slightly changed based on the pitch that we had on the side. So it's structural engineering 101 really, but it's,
Have we thought of submerging it into the ground a bit like you do with your swimming pools?
Well, we can't because of floodplain management, so we actually have to come out of the ground. And we are coming out of the ground.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. In terms of the sustainability aspect of it, this seems to be the main focus is around the operational performance. And I'm just wondering about the actual build of the structure itself and the sustainability aspect of that, and example, the materials.
Yeah, so ultimately it's a steel frame, skeletal frame, which is substantial in its own size for what we're trying to achieve as an arena. Obviously, we've got concrete bleachers that are required for the seating, and we've got a plastic ETFE roof because of weight loading to the roof itself. So, yes, we appreciate that those three products alone are not the greatest products in the world, but from a Stadia design principles, they are products that are used around the world. What the team are doing through the interiors, if you will, is what other products can we bring in that mitigate some of those long, the sustainability issues that we've got. So right across the board, there's a list of things that we're working towards and trying to attain, and we are attaining a lot of those through that design. But again, we're at preliminary design, we're moving into developed design, and that's really the big phase where we've got the structure, we've got the superstructure in place, we've got the field of play, we've got a design that's truly understood by the engineers. Now we're into the level of detail, and that comes from the developed design phase. And we've taken on board every comment that's been made regarding sustainability, and it is a key objective of the board and the project design team to ensure that we meet those needs.
Okay. Phil? Happy to move? Do I have a seconder for that? Aaron? Debate? Is there any debate? Jimmy Chen?
Yeah, this is the last and most the important iconic facility after earthquake. Because after earthquake, up to now almost 10 years. So the community, residents, ratepayer all concerned this one. But today's briefing also, Tuesday briefing, there's a comprehensive is the report, So thanks for the similar all those team, done a great job. So I support this one. I support the reason is because the particular emphasize these are the kind of the preliminary design totally is follow, to match the principle of the previous concept design. Then after that is the developing the design and for the detailed design to put on the construction. So we heard those comprehensive report, It's very the impressed with this report. But I'm concerned is we still need to improve those engagement, because on Tuesday the briefing based on the presentation particularly emphasized the stakeholders engagement strategy to be the developing. If we develop this one, but if we review the current all those the stakeholders, my personal view still not yet, to cover a wide range of the key community, and also have not yet totally compliant, consistent with the council's strategic direction. Also, some of the strategic document. For instance, on our strategic direction, we have value, voices, all the cultures and ages, particularly young people, different ethnic group, even the children. Second one is based on the multicultural strategy. We are all aware a moment in our city, 25% was born outside of the Christchurch, even outside of New Zealand. They are equally to access the council's resources and also the service, as well as participating in the decision-making process. So I do hope all those the engagement strategy, when be developed, can consider cover all those people to make this facility to be heard, welcome to be used, and fit for the older people's the purpose. This is my recommendation. But generally speaking, I totally support this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say a couple of thank yous to all the team involved in your presentations recently, bringing us on board and walking us through, going through all of those multiples of questions. And I think the public should have a lot of confidence in the amount of questions that are being asked by everyone at this table. I think everyone's been really engaged, and that's important. Alistair, I know you're leaving soon, but thanks very much from me, from the public. And no doubt most at this table, and others will say it at other times, but I just wanted to say it publicly. Thank you. And Barry, stepping up into the role you've taken, a lot of people in Christchurch might not know who you are. I've been lucky enough to work with you at DHB, and see you come into this role, and the leadership that you've brought should give the people of Canterbury and New Zealand a lot of confidence in this project getting on track and being delivered. I'm not going to say anything else around the delivery, but being delivered to the expectations that the people are wanting. So thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you. As a council, we've been very clear that sustainability needs to be a core part of the arena's design. It is a functional and design requirement under the CMIL project brief and needs to be taken into account throughout the entire process. However, what I have seen is that sustainability is an add-on, a nice to have in a business as usual 20th century stadium with a few high-tech options. What we're after is a 21st century stadium, a green stadium designed with the climate crisis in mind. It is concerning to me that sustainability outcomes are seen as reputational rather than environmental. Unlike most buildings, around 3/4 of the lifetime carbon impact of any stadium comes from its building materials, while the opposite is true for residential and business buildings, where 3/4 of the lifetime carbon impact comes from the operation of the building. That means the structure and design of the arena needs to be addressed now. I'm currently not happy with where this is at a sustainability level and still have concerns about where the costs are heading, although I do appreciate the mahi that has been done to control this. Apart from the gifting of the name Te Kaha, I'll be voting against the resolutions today. However, it is my hope when the developed design comes back to us in the mid-year, I'll be able to support it.
Thank you. Melanie?
I just wanted to say I'm becoming increasingly concerned about the financial implications of this build, so I'm going to abstain.
Pauline?
Yeah, I'm a bit of the same mind as Melanie and Mike, Councillor Davidson on this too. I'm very concerned about it. We've been told to build this. We've been told to build it where it's going. I still think the location is wrong, and because of the huge imposition this is going to be on our city, it's going to create a lot of shade all around it and a lot of reverse sensitivity, shall we say. So I'm wondering, Leanne, if you could split one. You know, but also one, I would like to support the continued developed design, but I don't support the design phase where it is now. Otherwise, I'll have to vote against all of one, and I'll support two. I'd like to see the design work continue, but I don't support where it is now. But otherwise, I'll abstain, and I'll support two. Thank you.
I am confused. One,
there's two parts to one.
Yes, I know, but until the preliminary design is accepted, then Kautui has no ability to continue on the developed design phase.
All right, I'll
so
just
it's
abstain.
Best to vote against the whole thing or abstain.
Abstain, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to speak for too long, but I think this is a really important step in the continuation of CMUA as we progress forward. I think what the public have said time and time again is they just want this built now. And so, you know, I think it's wonderful that we could have this in a public forum where you've given great confidence that actually this can be delivered. There'll be things that work through, but I mean, just remember back to when we had everyone talking about the size of the stadium and the delivery. The key theme now is we need to get on and do it. So I do hope we have a majority support today to get that in motion. I think it would be incredibly devastating for the city if we were to put another roadblock in the way of this. You know, you can have disagreements over the size and the like, but we have already worked on early works and things like that, which people were supportive of. So I think we do probably need to progress this today and just get on with it for the city. It's the last step, and I think it would be foolish if we weren't to acknowledge just the point in time we're at, knowing that the team are continuing to do really good work to drive value within it, to deliver something that's going to be wonderful for our city. So I do hope everyone supports it.
Kia ora, yeah, I totally agree with Sam. I think this is the time to actually keep moving forward. This is a time when our community needs hope and things to look forward to. This is actually acknowledging the huge emotional investment that our community has in this project. Really want to thank the team, and to actually sort of not progress it would be really disrespectful for the work that has already been done. So I will be supportive of this today.
I mean, I wasn't here for the initial vote, but I think it's fair to say that we have to remove politics from the decision and consider if the design is where it stands at the moment is fit for purpose and it caters to all members of our community. And we also need to consider if it takes into account our commitment to future generations. At the moment, there is a strong temptation to make politically popular decisions in the short term without consideration of the longer term implications. This isn't a minor decision, and I note that those who voted against removing library fines with the need to exercise caution now want to go ahead without similar due diligence when it comes to this particular decision. Christchurch deserves a world-leading design, and we deserve something that's unique and not a replica of other stadiums that we are now in competition with. The international trend is towards mid-sized, multi-use arenas that are agile and have lower operating costs. The focus on quality design with a unique value proposition, which also takes into account the future needs of communities that will be using this. So we have to build for the future, and that includes focusing on sustainability and lower carbon emissions. We're advised that the design stage of this project will include further opportunities to demonstrate climate change leadership and resilience. Yet it doesn't appear that the design concept this feature has been prioritised, the design fundamentals, and instead we're focusing on building a large stadium that is effectively a replica of other stadiums around the country. And my concern is the decision to add solar panels at a future point in time suggests this feature as an afterthought, and we're paying lip service to what should be a core design principle. The other factor is the cost escalation. We've heard a lot about the impacts of COVID and the rates impact. So we need to weigh up the economic benefits of the current proposal against a realistic understanding of the risks and the unbudgeted cost escalation, which we know is significant. We've heard a lot about the economic opportunities, but we haven't heard much about the loss opportunities, which a longer term investment in other areas might yield if we were to invest some of these funds in things such as climate change. So I will be voting against this.
Thank you. Look, this is going to be the cutting edge stadium in New Zealand, and keeping in mind it's going to be the cheapest because the government is giving us $220 million to complete this. It will be, for the ratepayers, the cheapest and the most advanced stadium in this country for the next 15 to 20 years, which is outstanding. And just a couple of other things. Prior to the earthquake, the council's own company, which ran these Lancaster Park, etc., was the single largest employer of temporary employment for students in the South Island and many others that are involved in the industry. It is actually economically important. Following the global financial crisis, when I was in the game of delivering large concerts for promoters and the public, etc., following the global financial crisis, we had a raft of entertainers coming and needing to tour because a lot of the entertainers don't own the license for their music. They don't earn money from their licenses. They have to tour and make money from ticket sales and sale of merchandise. So after the global financial crisis, we were all worried, and suddenly we had this tsunami, and I believe that will actually be in line with the opening of this wonderful stadium, because historically viruses run for a 7-year cycle. We don't know what this will be, but if you look at other viruses and how they've run, this could actually tie in with that. So there are some really good opportunities here. So I think a lot of us aren't looking at the big picture, and that's what we have to do. Thank you.
Right. Okay, well, Phil, would you like to close the debate? Oh. Sorry? Did you have your hand up? Sorry, I didn't see you. Must have been behind Andrew's head.
Thank you. I think what this report shows and this design shows that fundamentally we've chosen the wrong location. We should have built back at Lancaster Park. And interestingly enough, it's now come out that the land conditions here are not very good. And this is like a similar thing that we've seen with Kiwi 2 being moved into the central city. And a number of these anchor projects coming from areas which really valued them and gave an identity have now ended up in sites where we were told they had to be moved because the land condition was so poor that actually the land condition has been at least no better, if not worse than where they previously were. So this whole idea, I think, as a council of supersizing everything in our central city has been the wrong approach. And I think, you know, what we fundamentally see is that the costs have gone through the roof, the cost of acquiring private property to put public facilities and then deal with the ground conditions and to deal with the cost of and the time factor of being able to get on and do it has been significant and quite frankly horrendous. What's really clear about this design is the imposing structure that it will have on the local neighbourhood, especially where we're trying to encourage people to come and live in the inner city. But also, if you read the traffic assessment, I think what's really clear is that from a traffic assessment, there's a number of limitations around how people will get to and from this space. It is located close to the bus exchange, but when you think about places like Manchester Street and the ability for that just to be completely gridlocked now without this massive facility going in, then I think you start to see that there'll be a lot of issues when this goes ahead. But I think we've sort of passed the point of having a discussion around the location. But you know, at the end of the day, I think we do need transparency around the cost, and I do think we do need to engage with our community over what is probably the most expensive structure we will build as a council, at least this decade, possibly for several future decades. And I am worried about the sustainability issues that have been raised as well, where it does seem like sustainability is the first thing that gets cut to value manage, rather than the thing that's put in as a core principle of the design. I hope as part of the developed design that those things can be picked up, because I think the other thing that's disappointing about this design is it doesn't activate any of the edges that relate back into the central city.
Sarah?
Just really briefly, I've always been clear that I'm in favour of having a stadium, and the site is the right one. It's 400 metres from the bus exchange. But I'm in favour of the arena in the approved investment case and the staff recommended one, and this arena has increased the financial risk to ratepayers beyond what's acceptable. And for all the reasons I expressed in August, I'll be voting against all but the name this time too.
I just want to not enter the debate, but before I invite Phil to close the debate, I just wanted to acknowledge Alistair Pearson and thank you for your service to the council. I think this will be the last formal time that you'll appear in front of us, and I wanted to publicly acknowledge it. There's an enormous level of confidence and the support and advice that you have been able to bring to major projects in the city, and I think the city has been well served by you, so I just wanted to acknowledge you. Thank you very much. And now I'll hand it over to you, Phil, to close the debate.
Thank you very much. I think we're very lucky to have had Alistair all the way through here, along with a lot of others. But we have now got a fantastic team of people, designers over in Australia. Sadly, they talked to us on Zoom the other day. I agree with Tim. We're very lucky that the government have given us 220 mil. But even prior to that, the previous government bought a lot of that land and then gave it to us for not much. So if you add it all up, we're going to get a world-class stadium for about half cost, because a lot of it's like winning lotto, and we've got half of it for nothing. So I can't wait to get this underway, and I encourage everyone to please vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will put number 1 by itself. So all those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. So is it easy?
Could we have a division, please?
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Division.
On recommendation 1, Councillor Templeton? No. Councillor McClellan?
Yes.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Johansson? Councillor Galloway?
Yes.
Donovan? No. Councillor Coker?
Abstain.
Councillor Chen?
Yes.
The Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Scandrett?
Yes.
Councillor Major?
Yes.
Councillor Kewin?
Yes.
Councillor Goff?
Yes.
Councillor Davidson?
Go.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Councillor Cotter? Abstain. Councillor Chu? Yes. Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
It's 11 votes for, 3 votes against and 3 abstentions.
That's declared carried, and I will move now to items 2 and 3. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Sorry?
Can you put those two separate?
Yep.
2 and 3 separate.
So you don't want you want the commercially sensitive material? Yeah. I'll put them all together? Right. I'll put the motion, that's 2 and 3. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. Thank you very much. I'll move that we... oh no, we don't need to move that we come out of PX. It's 12:56, so there are a couple of other items that we can deal with. Thank you very much. Yeah, I know. No, that was my mistake. So the Audit Management Report 2021 and Debenture Trustee Audit recommendation from the Audit and Risk Management Committee. Sam, you'll move that. Seconded by Andrew. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. The next item is the draft submission on the Canterbury Regional Council Ngāi Tahu Representation Bill. This is a very short one. I did want to add a copy of the letter that we sent to ECAN last year when they consulted us on the bill. And so if that could just be approve the draft council submission on the Canterbury Regional Council Ngāi Tahu Representation Bill, including the correspondence that we had with ECAN last year in support. And I'll move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Andrew? Any discussion? I'll put the motion. Oh.
Yeah, not to drag it on, but I won't be supporting it. I just fundamentally believe that one person, one vote. And I think that I still fundamentally, in terms of democracy, that people sitting on either councils or Environment Canterbury should be elected. I know that there'll be disagreement on that, completely respect it, but just sort of being true to myself, I can't support it.
I'll quickly respond, which is essentially that when the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act was passed in 2011 after the earthquakes, Ngāi Tahu was named as a statutory partner, and we could all see the value of having Ngāi Tahu directly represented in terms of all of the strategic relationships that it established. When Environment Canterbury was disestablished as a function of central government, replacing them with commissioners, essentially they included Ngāi Tahu representation, and that was confirmed when it was a joint elected and appointed membership. And this is simply reinstating a really good process that was acknowledged by, cross-party really, over 2 sets of issues. So I'm very much in favour of this. So I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And abstention from Aaron and a no from Sam. Thank you. And if we've got time, we could just do the NEMA Regulatory Framework Review Trifecta Program, which I hastily wrote as a council paper after our discussion on Tuesday, and I'm happy to move that as well. Seconded by Sam. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. Have I missed anything?
No. Did you do 6? Did you do the
Well done at one go.
Yep, I did the minutes. I did the.
Done it all.
Right. So that is. Wait just a minute. Sorry, my apologies. Sorry. Kia whakiria te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turuku whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, homie hui e, tai ki e. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.